Chapter 241, Liang Bing's Guilty Conscience. Everything was unfolding exactly as Ethan had foreseen. The angels he'd earlier recalled weren't simply a pretext to test Angel Yan, they were now his frontline force against Huaye. Huaye, after all, would be desperate to reclaim his Tiangong, and even with the Styx Nebula's power at his back, he still had to rally his own troops, the Tianscum, before he could make any real advance. Ethan had anticipated every move. Tianji Cloud Computing Group's simulations had nailed down precisely how many Tianscum Huaye could muster in his immediate vicinity. Those without families would answer his call automatically. Those with families would hang back, uncertain, divided in their loyalties, and might only spare token detachments. Such was the brutal calculus of survival in the Tianscum clans. Originally, Ethan had planned to probe Huaye's black hole engine for weaknesses and study its inner workings at leisure. But this crisis left no time for experiments. His first priority was suppressing the rebellion and rescuing Angel Yan before Huaye could do her any harm. Ethan tapped out rapid commands on his hollow interface. Across the system, the angels stirred into motion, elite, unerring, and utterly loyal. As they launched toward the hotspots where Huaye's forces were gathering, Ethan drew a steadying breath. This was no longer a matter of research or reconnaissance. Lives and the fate of the Tiangong hung in the balance, and he would not fail. By dawn, rumors swirled that Morgana had slipped away with the demon legions, yet her escape changed nothing. She still had to be rescued. From the ramparts, Hishi's voice rang out clear and commanding. Engage them at once. I want 90% of the enemy forces neutralized before they reach our outer defenses. A chorus of, "Yes, Your Highness," answered him. The senior angels vibrated with excitement, while the younger cadres whispered that Hishi's boldness rivaled even Queen Kesha's. Unaware that his display was little more than a carefully honed imitation of his closest friend's style, they hailed him as the rightful king of Tianji. In reality, once the battle truly began, Hishi would slip behind the safety of his fourth-generation divine body clone, manipulating events from the shadows. That night, Ethan and Liang Bing sat beneath the flickering lanterns, sharing a bowl of shaved ice to cool their weary heads. With a soft sigh, Ethan broke the silence. "How is Angel Yan holding up?" Liang Bing, her eyes heavy with fatigue, straightened and pressed her hand to her throbbing temple. "Why do you ask? Are you after the sacred knowledge repository too?" She felt the question prick at old frustrations. Angel Yan had remained stubbornly unmoved, immune to every ritual and incantation she'd devised. Despite deploying countless methods to pry open his mental seals, none had worked as naturally or as decisively as whatever inner barrier he'd erected himself. It was a mystery that left her more perplexed than ever. Liang Bing watched in growing confusion. How was Angel Yan able to seal each new breach as soon as it appeared? She could detect no hidden countermeasures at work. Thank the heavens, Gei Xiaolun's anti-void strike still had some effect. Each time it connected, the intrusion backtracked by about 1%. But at that rate, it would take ages to drive the void forces entirely back. Angel Yan's resilience was frightening. If her divine energy ever ran out, she'd die, and then her body would be worthless. Morgana was forced to keep pouring power into her just to maintain the bare minimum of her godly vessel. Yet Angel Yan immediately turned every scrap of that energy against the void, trapping them all in a vicious stalemate. Ethan sneered, folding his arms. "Do you really think I lack access to a sacred knowledge treasury?" Morgana shrugged, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You're the king of the gods, of course you wouldn't." Liang Bing rolled her eyes. Wasn't this just a ploy to seize Angel Yan's corpse? Then again, Nen's divine hierarchy was vast. Silver-armored, winged soldiers and generals, each a third-generation super warrior, were everywhere. They had resources in abundance. Despite their power, though, none could break Angel Yan's stubborn seal. The stalemate dragged on, and with every passing moment, the risk only grew. I stood in awe before a sea of golden-winged figures, each a third-generation divine being, clad in radiant armor. In all my years, I'd never seen so many of them gathered in one place. Yet here they were, their extraordinary powers somehow held in check beneath Ethan's commanding presence. Only someone of unimaginable might could impose that level of control over so many deities at once. The absolute sovereignty of the gods depended on it. If even a few of their powers splintered outward, it could trigger a catastrophic domino effect across the heavens. I thought of Morgana, who once herself wielded third-generation divinity. She could easily have assisted the sword demon Atuo in perfecting his form, yet she never intervened. Why not? Because every god fiercely preserves the singularity of their own divine spark. Take the god of death, Karl, for example. No one rivals his cosmic clock of souls when it comes to gathering resources, laying claim to artifacts and essences from the ends of existence. And yet, despite that limitless supply, he's chosen to elevate only one divine body, snow. Even Karl understands that too many divine embodiments would dilute the uniqueness of each god's power. Our own Liang civilization is no different. Within the entire angel empire, only 2 female angels have ever ascended to true divinity, He-She and Ruoning. Since their elevation, the very phrase divine body has become taboo among angels. No one else dares aspire to it. Contrast that with the Kryptonian realm, where I'd seen at least 20 third-generation gods in golden armor and wings when I visited the supreme heaven. It was a dazzling, terrifying display of divine hierarchy, and a stark reminder of just how exceptional Ethan's feat really was. Ethan stared at the assembly before him and felt a jolt of disbelief. Even if every third-generation god in the known universe banded together, they still wouldn't match the numbers on display here. Liang Bing's eyes widened, the air around her crackling with barely contained amazement. If she truly understood that these were not just ordinary third-generation deities, but the war gods of the no-star realm, her shock would have been off the charts. Leaning closer, Liang Bing's voice dropped to a conspiratorial murmur. How about I help you reprogram Angel Yan's mindset? Her expression was almost affectionate, as she added, You've always been good at getting something for nothing. You deserve that title of devil. Ethan forced a cynical smile. He could suppress Angel Yan's sub-biological engine, give Liang Bing the leverage she wanted, and then she'd owe him a favor in return. Maybe she'd even use his technology to rewrite Angel Yan's very purpose. But the King of God's reputation was at stake. That's too messy, he said. If anything goes wrong, you'll pin it on Morgana and I'll be the scapegoat. Liang Bing laughed softly, her eyes glinting with secrets. You think I don't know how we'd spin this? It's the perfect Fall Guy setup. Despite the temptation, Ethan shook his head. No, if we play it that way, I'll feel like I'm just as guilty as you are. She tilted her head, studying him. But haven't we already become accomplices? Her challenge hung in the air, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then she shifted, ever graceful, ever dangerous, ready to push him further down the path they both knew they were straying toward. No, if the water's clear, there won't be any fish. And you're not planning to use my king's artifacts to run gene tests, are you? Ethan's question dropped into the room without warning. Liang Bing's cheeks flamed. Do I look the type? I'd never stoop to that. My gene energy is off the charts. I don't need to go poking around anyone else's DNA. He watched her, carefully, noting the tremor in her voice. He was certain she'd been dissecting his genetic signature, planning to hand the data over to Sword Demon Atuo and the rest. But without a proper containment field or a dedicated sampling device, she'd have to turn herself into a living test subject, a risky gambit, even for someone with her talents. Ethan shook his head. If that's the case, then forget I asked. Liang Bing exhaled, relief and guilt warring in her eyes. She wisely said nothing about Angel Yan. The tension hung in the air, heavier now that the pieces on this board were moving faster than anyone expected. Huaye had joined forces with the death god Karl sooner than planned, and together they'd launched a surprise strike on Merlot Heaven. In that charged moment, Ethan realized the game had changed. Allies would shift, loyalties would be tested, and the secrets buried within his own genes might be the key to everything yet to come. Ethan checked his chrono readings and frowned. They'd arrived fully 18 months earlier than planned, the exact window when Jishaolun's original scheme had stalled. Now that Blue Star had lost its galaxy power, the Council was secretly siphoning off divine energy, making sure the Kryptonians remained oblivious. They couldn't risk revealing that they held a backup of the galaxy power supergene, an artifact stolen straight from the Super Seminary. Chapter 242, Galaxy Power, Zhaoxin. As a vassal civilization of the Krypton Dominion, it would be unthinkable for them to withhold the galaxy power backup from their overlords. Yet this divine force cannot simply be handed to any ordinary recipient. It must go to someone who's already proven themselves as a super soldier, so that the transfer also upgrades the recipient's gene engine. At first, the obvious candidate seemed to be Liu Chuang. In theory, he fit the bill, a decorated warrior with a reinforced genetic framework. In practice, however, he failed to qualify. On one hand, Liu Chuang already holds the title of War God of the No-Star Cluster. Bestowing upon him the Galaxy Power's supergenes would be a tremendous waste of resources. Combining an existing war god with a prime-level deity might create a fearsome asset, but it borders on extravagance, and compatibility issues loom large. Neither the gene engine of the No-Star War god nor that of the Galaxy Power adapts easily to foreign templates. On the other hand, Liu Chuang's dossier revealed indisputable flaws. No matter how many times he's changed his face or assumed a new identity, the record of his past deeds remains indelible. In the end, it wasn't a lack of valor, but the shadows of his history that barred him from inheriting the Galaxy Power. Now that Blue Star has become a vassal of the Krypton civilization, it has, for reasons no one fully understands, been reorganized into an alliance headed by Dahua. Dahua has no desire to seize absolute power. Instead, it has convened a parliament where each of the hundreds of member states holds one seat. Dahua itself holds 10, and the parliamentary speakership remains a lifelong appointment for a Dahua representative. Even so, Dahua has been remarkably restrained. Any other power in its position would surely have claimed at least half the seats. With Krypton's backing, Dahua has finally cast off its dependence on the Dinor civilization. Yet it still lacks a clear grasp of the wider galactic order, how formidable its enemies are, the true might of the Archangels, or even the full strength of Krypton itself. Uncertain whether its decisions are sound or how best to interpret the shifting balance of power, Dahua must rely on the limited cosmic intelligence that Krypton has deigned to share. Drawing on that fragmentary data, it is now building its own strategic models and framing a new vision for Blue Star's place in the known universe. The Dinor civilization has no authority to override the Blue Star Council and unilaterally appoint the Galaxy Power, unless, of course, their claim of total integration with Blue Star is nothing but a facade. Moreover, the super soldiers derive their allegiance from Dahua and refuse to be identified by sterile genetic code names. When Dahua rejected Liu Chuang's nomination and taking into account Cheng Yaowen's special status, the choice fell instead to Zhaoxin. Thus, the title of Galaxy Power was awarded to Zhaoxin. Zhaoxin has more than earned it. Once a street urchin, he lived by a strict code of honor and never crossed the line into crime. In battle, his skill is unparalleled. His courage outshines even the galaxy's most vaunted heroes. It's hard not to wonder whether the Angel civilization's definition of bravery differs from the Dinor's celebrated standards. With Zhaoxin bearing the Galaxy Power, there is no fear that he will ever abandon his post. Make sure someone keeps a close watch on him, Emperor Dahua ordered. Don't let him, as leader, charge into the enemy camp on his own. At 9 that evening, Du Changwei, now Speaker of the Blue Star Parliament, arrived at the supreme heaven of the Krypton civilization. Her appointment in place of Qilin rested on two factors. First, Qilin herself admitted she lacked the confidence to preside over the parliament. Second, Du Changwei's status made her uniquely suited, a daughter of the Dinor civilization and the consort of God King Ethan. Although Du Changwei often quipped that she wasn't even worthy of the title princess and was merely a token appointee, her marriage to Ethan carried tremendous symbolic weight. In recognizing this, Emperor Dahua decreed that Du Changwei would serve as lifelong Speaker of the Blue Star Parliament, a clear signal of trust in Dinor and a further bond between their civilizations. Du Changwei bowed deeply before Ethan. Your Majesty, God King. Thanks to the intelligence shared by the Krypton civilization, Du Changwei and everyone on Blue Star finally grasped the true nature of the gods and their super warriors. The cataclysms they'd endured so far were nothing more than skirmishes. When these deities decide to go all out, planet-destroying blasts, solar system annihilations, and the instantaneous extinguishing of thousands of stars across the galaxy are mere child's play, each one unquestionably fatal to Blue Star. They realized, with grim clarity, that no amount of courage or collective self-sacrifice could sway these beings. If the gods were truly determined, they wouldn't even spare a glance for the planet's pleas. With that dawning realization, Blue Star's entire strategic outlook shifted on a dime. Du Changwei understood why their precarious peace could last only a few centuries at most. Ethan had explained that Blue Star existed as a proving ground for the gods, an arena where no weapons of mass destruction were permitted, and the gods' methods, though still lethal, remained within an imposed tolerance. Over hundreds of years, through relentless trials of blood and fire, the next generation of gods and super soldiers would be forged. This revelation struck Du Changwei like a thunderbolt. Confronted with such overwhelming power and patience, she felt her own strength slip away. Yet in the face of what lay ahead, she knew their only hope was to adapt, to find a way, however slim, to survive and endure this gauntlet by the gods. Du Changwei's gratitude ran deeper than words. She owed everything to the God King Ethan and the Kryptonian civilization that had rescued Blue Star from ruin. Yet in the end, all she could offer in return was her body and a single piece of crucial information. Ethan extended his hand, and without a second thought, Du Changwei stepped forward and let him lift her into his arms. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but attentive. Taking a steady breath, Du Changwei met his gaze. "The Super Seminary has agreed to work with us," she began. "They plan to transplant the Galaxy Power super gene into Zhao Xin. If it pleases your majesty, we can arrange for Zhao Xin to be brought to the Supreme Heaven for the necessary tests." Her words tumbled out with genuine confidence. Ethan surprised her by arching an eyebrow. He hadn't expected her to volunteer this so readily. But after a moment's reflection, his surprise gave way to understanding. The leaders of the Hydian Alliance had likely realized they couldn't keep such a project hidden from the Kryptonians. Better to demonstrate loyalty outright than risk suspicion. As for Zhao Xin, Du Changwei was sure the Kryptonians wouldn't resort to anything as crude as dissecting him for the gene. They simply didn't have the resources or the cruelty to genetically cultivate him themselves. All they needed was his cooperation in the research. Once the tests were complete, Zhao Xin would walk away unharmed, and Blue Star would gain a power far beyond anything it had known before. Ethan remained silent for a moment, weighing her proposal. Then he nodded. "Very well, make the arrangements," he ordered. The weight of his command was light, but the promise it carried was anything but. Blue Star's future had just grown a little brighter. If the Kryptonian Empire could come to respect Zhao Xin, all the better. Having absorbed the latest intelligence on both the angelic civilization and the Kryptonians, Master Dahua settled himself with calm confidence. After conferring with the world's brightest minds, they reached a unanimous conclusion: absolute transparency and unwavering obedience. No more secrets, no more half measures. Right now, the Kryptonians are the single greatest power in the known universe, the most formidable ally Blue Star could ever hope for, a patron incomparable even to the legendary Tauti civilization. In light of that, we must seize every opportunity and accept every favor they're willing to bestow. Worrying about appearances or politeness will only make us look weak and indecisive. From this moment on, we ask for all that we need and hold nothing back. Chapter 243, Small Shock and Big Shock. Du Changwei nodded, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Very nice," she said, never one to mince words. Ethan tapped his console, and a translucent holoscreen sprang to life between them. Du Changwei stared in disbelief as classified transmissions from the super-god civilization scrolled into view. Discussions about transferring the Galaxy Power's divine energy, candidate evaluations, debates over whether to notify the Kryptonian world, and even Lian Feng's private schemes to keep the Kryptonians hidden. Every confidential memo, every hushed strategy session, laid bare before her eyes. Her heart pounded. The gulf between their technology and this advanced civilization's was nothing short of enormous, as if they'd been brought face to face with the information equivalent of the Gulf War. Ethan reclined in his chair, watching her reaction coolly. "You really should learn to mask your dark plane emissions," he teased. Even if the Dino once boasted their number 3 surveillance unit, that tech is child's play next to mine. Du Changwei recalled how Liang Bing routinely slipped in and out of Juxia City undetected, even with Demon Number 1 posted there and Dino Number 3 scanning every inch. If someone like Liang Bing could evade those defenses, Ethan's own mastery must be light years beyond. Once proud Dino scientists, who'd claimed unrivaled strength, now looked almost quaint, their self-imposed isolation having left their technology stagnating. For the first time, Du Changwei felt the true weight of the chasm separating them from the giants of the super-god civilizations. And it was far more profound than she had ever imagined. Ethan was convinced his side still reigned supreme in the universe. With the combined might of the Milky Way fleet, the Nuo Star's God of War artifact, and the legendary Light of the Sun technique, he fancied he could unleash a god-slaying deterrent to cow the Holy Kesha into submission. It was exactly the kind of bravado you'd expect from a newly armed native tribe. Rifles blazed for the first time, and they immediately declared themselves rulers of the world, threatening any alien vessel that drifted into their sight. The truly perilous part was that Ethan didn't even recognize the arrogance of his stance. He had no idea where this boundless confidence came from. In the Super Seminary cosmos, isolation was doctrine. Every civilization was taught to keep to itself, for opening your borders meant risking annihilation at the hands of a more advanced foe. Take the fierce Sun civilization, for example. They inched forward, generation by generation, then, drunk on their own success, they abandoned all technological progress in favor of hedonism. They annihilated the Holy Kesha, tore their empire to pieces, and left behind a power vacuum that the demonic hordes filled the moment the Void Age dawned. Ethan himself had spent centuries frozen in stasis before he was awakened on Blue Star. Yet he never stepped up to guide its people, never led them along the path of steady development. And now, armed with reckless swagger, he was poised to make all the same mistakes. For millennia, Ethan had watched in silence. Only Carl, the so-called god of death, dared to delve into the void and master its most arcane secrets. It was no accident that centuries later, the two great hero legions would bear the names Angel Company and Carl Company. Their triumphs were hard-won, the fruit of relentless study and sacrifice. Had Guy Shaolin not risen to wield galaxy-class power, he would have been snuffed out long ago by forces he never fully understood. After all, how could anyone suddenly eclipse civilizations that had spent tens or even hundreds of thousands of years accumulating knowledge? Even galaxy power itself was born from the combined legacies of the ancient Kamigawa and angelic civilizations. Du Changwei found herself speechless, then inwardly grateful. They had chosen correctly in disclosing the existence of the Kryptonian civilization. If they'd kept it secret, if the Kryptonians had learned the truth later, who knew what reprisals would follow? Gathering her courage, she asked, "Your Majesty, what would they have done if we'd stayed silent?" Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. Nothing beyond the usual diplomatic snubs. At worst, they'd blacklist Blue Star. That's about as angry as they get. Du Changwei allowed herself a small laugh. He really had grown. She'd never have thought the young man who once stumbled over court protocol would handle this with such calm assurance. Du Changwei labored in near anonymity, fully aware that her work could easily backfire on Blue Star. What if the Kryptonians withdrew their technological aid? Or worse, what if the Kryptonian Empire intended to unify the known universe and bring Blue Star under its heel? After all, why would an alien civilization ever truly have benevolent motives? "Have we passed the test?" she asked Ethan. He shook his head and offered a wry smile. "Not yet, but don't worry, time is on our side." Du Changwei nodded, understanding at once what he meant. To the celestial powers, time was limitless, punctuated only by endless trials. One misstep now could doom Blue Star forever. Yet she also knew she had an edge, direct access to the celestial patriarch and a covert link to the God King's inner circle. With those channels, she could gather priceless intelligence on the God King's whims and designs, then hand it over to her analysts back home. Even if the God King suspected her espionage, he wouldn't, or couldn't, stop her. Ethan tapped a few commands into his console and activated the secure comlink. It was time to bring Liang Bing into the loop. Ethan's private channel buzzed to life. A cool, controlled voice answered, "Yes, my honored lord." "Stand by," Ethan replied, angling his device just right. Almost immediately, Liang Bing doubled over, a sharp gasp escaping him. Again with the weeds, the thought exploded in his mind. The pain was blistering, an agony that seared straight through his spirit and squeezed his heart. Although he'd endured Ethan's ice sculpture rose trick before, first with Ethan, then with Du Changwei, it never got any easier. Never. At that moment, Du Changwei swept into the room, her expression cool. "What are you doing?" she asked Liang Bing without missing a beat. "I don't have all day." Liang Bing took a shaky breath and pinned her with a reproachful glare. She just shrugged, already half tuned out. He forced his voice back under control. "It's nothing. He glanced at Ethan's frozen profile on the comm. "I just thought you might let Ge Xiaolun know exactly how Du Changwei is using this method." Before he could finish, Liang Bing clicked off the link with a long, exasperated sigh. Tell Ge Xiaolun? And risk planting thoughts of betrayal? He wasn't about to do that. Not for anything. Although Ge Xiaolun had fallen, and his angelic thought genes were now corrupted into demonic ones, Liang Bing knew full well that Ge Xiaolun still nursed feelings for Du Changwei. Letting Ge Xiaolun see or hear about it would only infuriate him. Du Changwei remained silent. She hadn't allowed herself to think of Ge Xiaolun in ages. Any spark of affection she once felt had been repeatedly extinguished by his reckless behavior. What's more, Ethan had made sure Ge Xiaolun never saw or heard him directly. His only contact was those teasing messages to Liang Bing. Messages Liang Bing would never dare pass along. When Ethan mused, "Ge Xiaolun still wants to hear my voice? Dream on." It was clear he was in no hurry to change that. Then Ethan dropped the real bombshell. "I've already perfected the mass production process for the Nuoxing War God. Next up is Galaxy Power, so don't waste a second worrying about what I'll do with Xin Zhao. Galaxy Power will soon be worthless." Du Changwei's eyes widened at the sheer magnitude of his revelation. "Your Majesty, is this for real? You can't possibly mean it." Du Changwei's voice trembled as he struggled to speak. Ethan reclined gracefully in his throne-like chair, the corner of his mouth lifting in a confident smile. "It's absolutely true. To you, the 3 flagship Godcraft projects of Galaxy Power might look like cutting-edge marvels beyond comprehension, but to me, they're simply engineering challenges waiting to be unraveled." Du Changwei's eyes bulged. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, utterly at a loss. Ethan's smile widened, his gaze calm yet unshakable. "I know you'll doubt this announcement at first," he went on. "The Dino civilization will question its authenticity, but once Galaxy Power goes online, once they witness its capabilities, they'll be stunned beyond belief." A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the enormity of Ethan's words sank in. The fate of an entire civilization, he implied, rested on the confirmation of his bold claim, and he seemed more than ready to deliver. Chapter 244, Lianfeng, Impossible, Absolutely Impossible. Du Changwei hurried down the gleaming corridors of Blue Star's command center and paused before Lianfeng's office. She tapped lightly on the doorframe. "Aunt Lianfeng, I'm back. What's the situation?" Lianfeng looked up from her console, her face pale and drawn. She swept her hand across the holo display, bringing up streams of surveillance data. "It's all exposed," she said softly. "The Kryptonian civilization saw every move we made." News of the Galaxy Power transferred to Zhao Xin had already spread through Blue Star, and everyone was on edge waiting to see how God King Ethan would react. Lianfeng had hoped to transfer that divine energy covertly, keeping the Kryptonians in the dark so Blue Star could gain the upper hand. Instead, they'd intercepted her plan, and Blue Star's own leaders had refused to risk their lives for a secret they didn't trust. Du Changwei bowed her head respectfully, though her voice carried an unmistakable edge. "They're all uneasy, demanding answers. Some want to place Dinor scientists under permanent surveillance. Others argue we should force Dinor to hand over their technology. Even Dahua, who's always favored diplomacy, has started talking about forming a regulatory commission to keep Dinor in check." Lianfeng closed her eyes and pressed her fingertips to her temples. She'd undertaken this gambit to strengthen Blue Star's defenses and to empower Ethan, but the fallout was far worse than she'd anticipated. Mistrust had taken root among her closest allies. She drew in a steadying breath. "Summon the council," she ordered at last. We need to control the narrative before Ethan hears about our missteps. I refuse to stand before him with half the galaxy suspecting our motives. Du Changwei nodded and slipped out to carry the order. Lianfeng stared at the holographic projections of distant star systems, her mind racing. Impossible, she thought. Absolutely impossible that her well-intentioned plan should leave her cornered on both sides, by friends who feared betrayal and by a god king who now had every right to judge her. Lianfeng paced the length of the planning chamber, wrestling with the same thought over and over. If too many powerful factions on Blue Star consolidated their influence, it would only trade one tyranny for another. That was why they'd almost named the facility the Black Great Wall Base, an ironic reminder that no fortress could truly keep out ambition. She also understood why Dahua had grown increasingly uneasy with her decision to disguise the transfer of divine power. After all, controlling the galaxy's energy was Blue Star's only real chance at securing its future. By hiding that transfer, they were essentially handing the planet's destiny over to unseen hands. What? Lianfeng spun on the spot when Du Changwei's voice cut through her thoughts. Du Changwei's expression was grim. Every step we take, she said, is being monitored and fully recorded by the Kryptonian civilization. Lianfeng froze, her breath catching in her throat. But we have Dinor 3. Its data is encrypted beyond anyone's reach. No, Du Changwei interrupted quietly. I've seen it all. I saw the records of your dark data scans. I even saw you and Aunt Lianfeng discussing how best to conceal the divine power transfer. Lianfeng's face drained of color. Kryptonian encryption had always been the gold standard, and she'd layered her own black data protocols on top. If Du Changwei could read it, then anyone from that civilization could. All her secrets were laid bare. Even the hidden spears she carried, symbols of power and protection, were no longer hers alone to command. This is the danger of unchecked information technology. Lianfeng stammered, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, Changwei, Du Changwei stood silently for a moment, then spoke sharply. You shouldn't be apologizing to me. You owe an apology to everyone on Blue Star. You nearly drove our world to the brink. She knew Lianfeng's motives had been sincere, but Lianfeng had recklessly gambled the fate of an entire planet on the Kryptonians remaining oblivious, a hubris that reminded Changwei all too much of Lianfeng's father. With unwavering calm, she continued, effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties as commander of the Black Great Wall Base. Qilin will take over. Lianfeng's shoulders slumped, but she offered no protest. I understand. After a pause, she summoned the courage to ask, what are the Kryptonians planning next? Will Zhao Xin assist with detection and research? Chapter 10. In theory, you no longer have authorization to access these secrets, Du Changwei said softly, but since the official notice hasn't arrived yet. She let the words hang in the air. Ethan stared at her, bewildered. He'd hoped to be taken seriously. His calculations on the Galaxy Force's capabilities were sound, but standing here in the Black Great Wall Base, he felt utterly dismissed. The technological chasm between their scientists and the Kryptonian civilization was so vast that his conclusions weren't even worth a nod. Du Changwei met his gaze without flinching. She was buying time. The Empire's policy was usually merciful. Unless he'd made a grave, principled mistake, his fate would likely be a transfer, not a sack. But until the paperwork arrived, her presence here functioned as the de facto notice. She simply didn't want him to lose face in front of the base. Clearing her throat, Du Changwei laid out the full truth. Worse still, the Kryptonians haven't even asked for our cooperation. His Majesty the God King has already begun mass-producing the No-Star War gods. According to the latest dispatch, the Galaxy Force will hit mass production very soon too. Once it's rolling, our so-called Galaxy Force is nothing but a subordinate gene engineered by the Kryptonians. Ethan's heart sank. What? No. Impossible. He ran a hand through his hair, disbelieving. All his work, all his painstaking models and simulations, dismissed as mere afterthoughts in the grand scheme of a civilization light years beyond them. He looked back at Du Changwei, searching her face for a glimmer of jest, but her expression was resolutely serious. Silence settled between them as the reality of his demotion and of his side's diminishing role in the looming galactic power play crashed down. The official inquiry might not have arrived yet, but Ethan knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. This is impossible. The Galaxy Force. Lianfeng's convictions trembled, and with them, her authority. How could the Galaxy Force be mass-produced? After all, it was one of the 3 legendary god-forging initiatives, a joint triumph of the Shenhe, Angel, and Dinor civilizations. In the annals of the future, its singular supreme god would stand unchallenged. The Galaxy Force was one of our 3 great god-forging projects. Lianfeng began, but Du Qiangwei cut her off. Aunt Lianfeng, perhaps it was revolutionary back then, Du Qiangwei said coolly, but we're talking about tens of thousands of years ago. His Majesty Ethan has declared the Galaxy Force obsolete. Obsolete? Lianfeng's heart pounded as she struggled to find her rebuttal. Millennia of history weighed heavily. Even Dinor's own records didn't stretch that far back. Du Qiangwei leaned forward, her voice soft but certain. What's more, I've personally seen the mass-produced starless war gods derived from it. Lianfeng's eyes widened in disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but only one word escaped. What? Despite the day's relentless barrage of surprises, Du Qiangwei sat in stunned silence, her gaze locked on the trembling holographic readouts before her. At last, she steadied her voice and laid out the grim figures she had unearthed. His Majesty Ethan has gone even further, she announced. He declared the original No-Star War gods obsolete, artifacts of a bygone era, and completely overhauled their genetic templates. What once served as the No-Star series is now reborn as the Krypton War God Supergene. Their performance metrics far exceed even Liu Chuang's by orders of magnitude. The weight of that revelation hit Du Qiangwei like a tidal wave. If the Krypton civilization could mass-produce an entire army of war gods, creatures once thought impossible to replicate, then the 3 sacred God-forged projects her own people had relied on for centuries suddenly looked moot. Every claim of angel civilization supremacy and every boast of advanced alien worlds wilted in comparison. It was undeniable proof that Krypton possessed unparalleled biogenetic mastery. From a purely strategic standpoint, the only sensible move for Blue Star was to bow to Krypton's leadership, accept the junior role, and leave the worrying to those with true power. Yet Lianfeng could not swallow the notion so easily. She pressed her lips together, eyes narrowing. Even if Krypton has cracked this technology, she insisted, they still require the sanction of the High Clock at the Super Seminary. That approval isn't handed out to just anyone. Mass production or not, there are limits no civilization can overstep without facing the seminary's judgment. The room fell silent again, each of them pondering just how high and how final those limits truly were. Without the big clock's authorization, the galaxy's full power could never be unlocked. That was why Lianfeng was never actually imprisoned. She was, after all, an official representative of the Dinor civilization, and the leadership on Blue Star had to show proper respect for Dinor interests. Still, protection was the keyword. When Qilin discovered that she'd been appointed to oversee Blue Star's most critical department, she was equal parts terrified and baffled. At the same time, Reyna had been released as well and was now serving as a living power reservoir at the Black Great Wall base. Ethan, formerly known as Luther, had quietly arranged for Lianfeng, Qilin, and Reyna to meet openly for the first time. Even Angel Leng was invited along, if only to keep a close watch. The alliances were fragile, the stakes impossibly high, and yet at this moment of uneasy cooperation, hope still flickered like the distant glow of an awakening star. Chapter 245, Gathering at the Black Great Wall. Rosé. Reyna's voice trembled as she spotted Du Qiangwei, a flush creeping up her cheeks. Embarrassment and hesitation warred in her eyes. Du Qiangwei met Reyna's gaze, aware of the stormy circumstances that bound them. Reyna, formerly Lena, had been under Morgana's sway when the Grand Canyon was shattered, yet Du Qiangwei could hardly bring herself to reproach her. After all, Reyna's greatest betrayal had been at the hands of Liang Bing, Du Qiangwei's own father's murderer, only for the 2 bitter rivals to later debut together as the celebrated duo Ice Sculpture Rosé. Off to the side, Qilin observed the uneasy reunion. In the original chronicle, she had never been a rookie sniper for the Xiangbing Company. She had simply materialized one day in Ethan's inner circle, elevated almost overnight to the Luther clan. Her prowess said to match the war god Nuoxing himself. In that first timeline, Qilin, Du Changwei, and Reina had no ties to one another, but now each stood among Ethan's chosen women. Had Ethan been merely a son of Blue Star, Qilin might have questioned the alliance. But he was far more than that. Ethan was the king of gods, an unrivaled god-king whose influence reached every known and uncharted realm. And tonight, beneath the looming ramparts of the Black Great Wall, their fates would once again intertwine. Ethan's assumed identity gave him every right and the necessary authority to round up stranded refugees across the region. With the Qilin's aid, he'd already sheltered the entire population of a fallen city, opening his doors to countless escapees. Such a monumental kindness could never be fully repaid. Moved by the bond he'd formed, the Qilin spirit had even adopted the visage of the legendary Queen of Krypton to personally receive 3 very special survivors, Du Yaosheng, Di Yaosheng, and Princess Leng, the youngest sister of a high-ranking consort, still bearing her royal title. Princess Leng, known among her fellow seraphs as Angel Leng, found herself stifling a yawn as the newcomers took their seats in the grand reception chamber. She was a veteran guardian angel, not some fledgling novice who needed instructions on how interstellar politics worked. Even if Ethan worried about her loyalties and refused to grant her a direct hand in Kryptonian state affairs, he ought at least to let her coordinate interactions with this new culture. After all, managing foreign conflicts and guiding civilizations was precisely her forte. So why on earth, literally, had she been dispatched to this gloomy Great Wall base on Blue Star? Before she could puzzle it out, a familiar presence caught her eye across the dimly lit corridor. "Burning Heart?" she whispered, using the old code name for her comrade. Stepping forward in disbelief, Angel Leng called out, "Sister Leng?" The other angel froze, her wings fluttering in surprise. Angel Jixin had never expected to find Angel Leng here, at the far edge of Blue Star's outposts. And yet, somehow, fate had brought 2 of Krypton's finest ancient guardians face to face once more, this time on alien soil. Ethan stood just inside the hall as Jixin practically skipped past him, greeting the gathering of family and old friends. Everyone clamored for her attention. Angel Lingxi and the others threw their arms around her with boisterous hugs, except Angel Leng. Leng remained perfectly composed at the back of the room, arms crossed and expression cool. Jixin caught sight of her and laughed. "He's your hero, right?" Jixin teased, looping her arm through Ethan's. "The future powerhouse of the galaxy, Ethan." Ethan managed a wry smile as heads turned in his direction. He stepped forward and inclined his head toward Leng. "Good to see you, Leng." Leng allowed the faintest twitch of her lips before turning away with a soft snort. No hearty hug, no effusive praise, just her trademark reserve. As everyone settled into small clusters, Jixin took Ethan over to Qilin's desk. "The entire Xiangbing Company and the Dino Terraforming Division are under your command now," she reminded Qilin, tapping the project files. Qilin nodded gravely. The weight of 2 interstellar ventures clearly sat heavy on his shoulders. Nearby, Du Tianwei and Lina fell into easy conversation, laughter drifting over the room as they reminisced about training days and old misadventures. Lina's gaze kept drifting back to Ethan. She'd once harbored a quiet crush on him. But when their eyes met, Ethan offered only a courteous nod and a gentle smile. In that moment, Lina understood. Ethan's devotion to Jixin was unwavering and more powerful than any star in the sky. Du Changwei turned to Qilin and said, "You were drawn to His Majesty Ethan, accepted the crown of Krypton, and in an instant seemed destined for divinity, though you've not quite attained godhood yet." Meanwhile, despite her high birth, Reina never even reached Queen-elect status. She's been hiding in the background all this time. Learning her sister's true identities had shaken Qilin, and she now regretted rushing into the role. Ethan, however, reassured her. As king of the gods, his will was absolute, inevitable and unthwartable by any accident or force majeure. He insisted she embrace her queenship without fear. Assigning her to oversee the Black Great Wall base was merely a trial to temper her spirit. He also reminded her that threats from the fabled Triangle civilization would come in time, and charged Qilin with preparing for them. Long Bing, eager to prove herself, immediately volunteered for the mission, only to be gently sent back by Ethan. Qilin felt the weight of expectation, but she refused to disappoint him. Determined to become a capable queen of Krypton, she threw herself into her studies. Angel Lang stepped onto the Black Great Wall base with a single purpose in mind, to train Keelan. Ethan's plan was simple, yet inspired. He paired her with Angel Ji Shin, a battle-hardened warrior, so that Keelan would benefit from both martial prowess and cutting-edge research. One mentor on his left, the other on his right, they would guide every facet of his growth. In effect, it was the same angelic configuration the King of Angels used for his own wards. Meanwhile, Ethan had relieved Angels Lingxi, Yiqian, and Breeze of their previous duties. With no other assignment to report to, they cheerfully fell in behind Leng's team and followed her to the base. There was no idle moment there. Lena, while not versed in the ancient lore of the Liang civilization, took charge of general instruction, filling in wherever she could and making sure every angel contributed. Not everyone greeted these changes with enthusiasm. Reyna, the Empress of the Sun and Goddess of Daylight, was furious that Ethan hadn't appointed her queen. How could someone of her stature be overlooked? Yet Ethan disarmed her pride by offering glorious sunbathing sessions and an open invitation to return home to the Xiangbing company. With few alternatives and secretly thrilled to rejoin her people, Reyna relented. Ultimately, she admitted she was more than pleased with her lot, even if it had felt a bit humiliating to be passed over at first. If Du Qiangwei hadn't convinced her otherwise, Reyna would have retreated into hiding. After all, demons, gluttonous beasts, and giant wolves no longer threaten Blue Star, thanks to the Kryptonian civilization's purge of every mutated creature. Instead of fighting monsters, the planet's leaders now set their sights on the stars, planning an orbital defense ring to safeguard Blue Star. Making that grand vision real falls to Ethan. Freshly ascended to galactic power, he received a tremendous surge of energy from Reyna, enough to elevate him instantly to a divine body. That puts his abilities beyond even Geishaolun's. In later phases, Geishaolun attained only an invincible body, not a true divine body. Now with Reyna's life force and Angel Jixin's tutelage combined, Ethan stands as a third-generation divine body and an invincible body in one. He lacks only Geishaolun's legendary Void Engine sword to surpass her outright. Ethan may aim straightforward in mind, but that works to his advantage. Under Angel Jixin's patient guidance, far more rigorous and insightful than Geishaolun ever received, he's mastering advanced techniques like the dark energy conversion algorithm. Miss that step, and he won't even pass her trials. With every lesson, however, Ethan grows stronger, bringing Blue Star's stellar defense project one step closer to reality. Ethan finally understood the secret. By never taking that year-and-a-half hiatus, his pace and efficiency of learning would inevitably outstrip Geishaolun's in the end. After all, in the original story, it took an eye-opening blind date to jolt Geishaolun awake, and Ethan didn't need any theatrics like that. He simply pressed on in his studies, never once looking back. Chapter 246, A Black Hole Alters the Course of War. Ethan exhaled in relief the moment Qilin took command of the heroic company, veterans tempered by blood and fire. With Qilin at the helm, the stubborn divisions within the Xiangbing company finally faded away. Farther afield, the Angel Nebula teetered on the brink of disaster. Although their original strategy had shifted, Shi, determined to crush Huaye and rescue Angel Yan at once, ordered a full-scale angelic bombardment. In an instant, 99% of Huaye's forces were reduced to ashes, and both the Tao Ti and Giant Wolf civilizations reeled under the devastation. Still, Tao Ti King Xiu and the formidable Sumali refused to bow. Sumali, having narrowly missed a fourth-generation divine body at the hands of Karl, the god of death, nonetheless reclaimed his lost silver blade and ascended to a third-generation divine form. Departing from the previous timeline, he also stole a female angel's genetic code to cultivate an androgynous power, then hacked the galactic power gene archives at the Black Great Wall base. But without proper training or authorization, these ill-gotten gifts left him little more than a pseudo-third-generation super warrior. Ethan had never understood how the gene engine system worked. On a whim, he'd injected himself with both the female angel gene and the galaxy power super gene. Even so, not even a pseudo-third-generation super soldier had given Angel Jixin such a hard fight. Now, however, Death God Karl had leapt directly to a true third-generation divine body. Clad in divine silver armor and wielding his legendary silver blade, he was effectively untouchable. And then there was the Tao-Ti King Shi-Ho. Its void engine operated at a low frequency, but Carl had quietly installed a special software module for it, so lightweight that it ran effortlessly, yet precisely targeted the attack protocols of any Angel gene. When the Angels' bombing squadron least expected it, Carl unleashed the Tao-Ti King Shi-Ho in tandem with Ethan's stealth assault team. In a single, brutal strike, they wiped out the Angel bombers before they could react. Watching the carnage unfold, He-Shi realized the magnitude of the threat and immediately contracted the defensive perimeter. He ordered the Yiran civilization's fleets and every other aerospace-level contingent under Angel command into the front line, with Angel forces themselves providing critical support. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, as both sides braced for the next phase of a war that was only just beginning. Chapter 7: Siege of the Void. King Shi-Ho of the Tao-Ti possessed no technology to terraform worlds or alter the fabric of star systems. Facing an aerospace-level civilization, his only recourse was to flood enemy space with endless waves of void engine warships, vessels programmed to swarm in massive, suicidal counterattacks. Yet even as the Tao-Ti fleets bore down on them, the Angel civilization's defenses held firm. Ethan stood on the command deck of the Celestial Dawn, the flagship of the Angel Vanguard. Through the viewport, he watched the first ripples of the Void Rift distort starlight. Dozens of rust-streaked warships poured through, their void drive cores glowing with malignant energy. At their vanguard surged the Angel warriors, descendants of ancient seraphs clad in iridescent armor, backed by the ironclad Angel vanguards. When the two forces clashed, the toll was devastating. Thousands of Tao-Ti ships exploded in brilliant conflagrations. Countless Angel vessels were shredded in return. Yet the losses on the Angel side amounted to only 10% of those inflicted on the enemy. "A hard price," Ethan murmured, "but we can bear it." He recalled the brutal zeal of the Tao-Ti and their allies, chief among them the giant wolves, a warlike species that worshipped death itself. To them, each fallen warrior returned to Carl, the god of death, where they rejoiced in the promise of rebirth. Casualty lists held no terror for these fanatics. Instead, they rallied every fresh fleet as if it were a holy mandate. Across the expanse, more void-driven armadas were coalescing. "They're still coming," Lieutenant Maris reported, her voice calm beneath the cockpit hum. "Another convocation of rifts is opening 2 light-years out." Ethan nodded. "Then we hold the line. Send word to Fraser and Nolan." Fraser, the aerospace commander, whose unorthodox tactics had already earned him near-mythic renown, would coordinate orbital strikes. Nolan, leader of the Holy Left Wing, would spearhead the counteroffensive, where the void-spawned vessels massed thickest. Together, their combined forces formed the Angel civilization's spear point, an invincible wedge driven into the heart of the enemy. The first squadrons of Angel vanguards plunged into the rift, trailing glimmering wake flames. Ethan activated his comm channel. "Fraser, this is Ethan. All units standing by. Let me know when you're in position." A moment later, Fraser's crisp reply crackled through. "Celestial Dawn, we're closing on your mark. Precision volleys against their drive cores will cripple the next wave. On my go." "Understood," Ethan answered. He exchanged a brief look with Maris. "Brace for impact," he said softly. As the Tao-Ti swarm erupted from the rift, exploding into the waiting firestorms of angelic ordnance, Ethan felt a grim satisfaction. The siege might drag on, and death worshippers might cheer every fallen comrade, but the Angel civilization would endure. For now, the Celestial Dawn held its course, a brilliant beacon in the black, and at its helm, Ethan prepared to meet each new tide of void-born terror with steadfast resolve. With the mighty Holy Kesha on their side, the Angel Alliance has suffered almost no serious losses, yet this latest crisis has begun to undermine its morale. Thankfully, it isn't the coalition under Angel Yan that's wavering, but the one led by He-Shi. Although He-Shi lacks Holy Kesha's legendary reputation, the long-established aerospace civilizations still preserve ancient records, and those records name King Tianji as one of the 3 great Angel Kings of old. No one dares challenge the legacy of those former sovereigns. At any moment, He-Shi could demand that they replace their current supreme ruler. Life as the head of an aerospace-level civilization is fleeting. In the Super Seminary universe, only gods and first-generation super warriors ever achieve true immortality. Even second-generation super warriors, like Du Changwei, as Angel Yan frequently reminds everyone, rarely live beyond 1,000 years. For an angel civilization, seeing hundreds of different leaders rise and fall over the centuries is perfectly normal. For those worlds brought under the angel civilization's protection, Holy Kesha expressly forbade any further weapons development. Instead, they were to live in peace, find contentment in honest work, and pursue true love. As a result, their armed forces were far weaker than those of the ever-warring Tauti and Giant Wolf civilizations. "Huaye, have you got it?" Ruoning asked, exasperation in his voice. "I've got it," Huaye replied, nodding firmly. Ruoning raised an eyebrow. "Really learned it?" Huaye flashed a confident smile. "Would I joke about it?" Ruoning finally conceded with a reluctant nod. They were talking about Huaye's mission to activate the black hole generator. Death God Karl had already coded a secondary program for the engine. Huaye's only task was to run it. Yet nothing about this moment matched the simulations, and Huaye had hit unexpected snags upon returning. If he didn't move quickly, he feared he might be stuck here on Blue Star. Ethan had secretly set his sights on mastering the black hole engine, but Ruoning refused to teach him more than the bare minimum. She worried that once he understood the system, he might cut her out entirely, and she knew he was capable of it. Left with no choice, Ethan feigned ignorance, stalling over the program that activated the black hole. At last, Ruoning relented enough to keep him in the loop. "We can't push forward yet," she warned. "Hexy's influence is too great, and the 19th Defense Line's first barrier is brutal. Even if Karl doesn't flinch at Teodi or Giant Wolf casualties, we simply can't take heavy losses now. If we bleed ourselves dry here, how will we ever launch an assault on Merlot Heavenly Palace later?" Branded a traitor by some, Ruoning was nonetheless the only one who truly understood the 19th Line's defenses. Now a fourth-generation divine body, she knew every protocol, but every backdoor. Even if the enemy updated their algorithms, her grasp of angelic civilization allowed her to crack any code. That expertise was about to be tested. Ethan and his ally Sumali were closing in on the front lines of the 19th Defense Line, where the next great battle awaited. Chapter 7. The Dawn of the Black Hole Engine Commander. Ethan studied the tactical hologram floating before him. "They haven't even broken through the 19th Defense Line yet," he murmured. "Once they get within range, we trigger the black hole. Its light-speed singularity will resolve every threat in an instant." Huaye's lips curved into a cold smile. "And as for Tauti and the Giant Wolf, let them fend for themselves. I couldn't care less how many fall." On the shattered plains below, Tauti and the immense spectral wolf charged forward, unaware that the enemy ranks had already begun to pull back. By the time the first ripples of a black hole touched the battlefield, it would be too late. A breathless aide burst into the war room. "Your Majesty, King Ethan, it's happening." Standing at Ethan's side, Hexy closed her eyes for a heartbeat, calling upon the sight that had earned her fame across the galaxies. When she opened them again, her face was pale. "It's real," she said, voice tight. "The so-called black hole engine can actually produce a singularity. That man, Karl, has done the inconceivable." Ethan's jaw clenched. Hexy's wisdom was legendary. If she sounded alarmed, the gravity of their situation could not be overstated. "These engines won't merely crack a single defensive line," Hexy warned. "They'll redefine warfare itself. An entire aerospace civilization, and the angelic host sworn to defend it, could be erased in a heartbeat." Ethan turned back to the hologram, its display flickering as energy readings spiked along the 19th line. Ahead of them, Tauti roared in defiance, and the spectral wolf bared its fangs. But neither beast, nor any soldier on that field, stood a chance against a weapon born of pure gravitational collapse. In the silent moment before chaos erupted, Ethan braced himself. The era of black hole warfare had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 247. Multi-Space Mapping of Star Destiny. The 19th Defense Line stretched 50 light-years from the ramparts of the mellow celestial court, an immense buffer, yet barely enough against the singularity Huaye had spawned. Though his black hole's gravitational radius hadn't yet reached the full 50 light-year mark, its pull was growing by the hour. If he advanced even one more parsec, he could detonate the singularity in full force, unleashing a ravenous maw that would devour every ship, planet, and resource in its path. What made the threat even deadlier was Huaye's newfound restraint and power. In this rewritten timeline, his high-frequency black hole generator produced singularities larger, more potent, and faster to deploy than ever before. Close-quarters combat was out of the question. Any direct engagement would be suicide. Commander Hishi summoned her senior officers to the observation deck, the stars blazing coldly beyond the viewports. "Our only chance is to fight from range," she declared, voice tight with determination. "We'll deploy the star life arrays next. We cannot keep sacrificing pilots, especially not against those monsters." A tense silence followed. Holy Kesha and Captain Li Shan exchanged imperious glances, unmoved by Hishi's hesitation. Yet Hishi would not relent. She refused to treat her soldiers as expendable fodder. If her fleet was to stand a chance, she would strike from afar, mapping, pixel by pixel, the multi-dimensional distortions of their enemy's warped star destiny, or die trying. Ethan's face was hard with determination. "They even have Ruoning on their side. He's senior to me and knows Tiancheng's entire defense grid inside out. With his help, they could break through directly. If I just sit here, they'll pick us off one by one. I have to go out there myself." He turned to the two angels flanking him. "Your Highness Hexy, we're not afraid of sacrifice." "For justice, death is no shame," echoed the old angel. "For justice," repeated the young angel, eyes blazing. Above them, the weapon known as Star Fate whirled into action. It was crafted from dark and light silver alloys and executed impossible maneuvers among the stars. Though its projectiles lacked true lightspeed drives, they teleported via wormhole conduits, allowing strikes out to a 50 light-year radius. Nothing short of dark silver or a void barrier could withstand its force. In the face of Star Fate, 99% of the Super Seminary's forces were defenseless. Even the Tao Ti-class battleship, which relied on starlight to power its energy shield, became Xingming's first target. From the command bridge to the outer rings of Tiancheng's fortress, a new kind of war had begun, one where sacrifice and fate would clash among the stars. Chapter 12. Blade of Starlight. Ethan's void engine surged to its limit, the hum of its high-frequency coils echoing through the vacuum of space. In an instant, he rocketed toward the nearest Taudi battleship, its hull colossal, its starlight barrier legendary, yet utterly defenseless against his approach. With a single fluid motion, he unsheathed his starlight edge and drew it across the enemy vessel. The barrier rippled once, then shattered like glass. The ship was cleaved from bow to stern in a brilliant flare of light. "Starlight barrier, invalid," crackled panicked voices over the comm channel. "He's too fast, fall back. Our flagship, it's gone." From the heart of the Taudi armada, King Zhu watched in stunned silence. Never before had any foe breached his lines so effortlessly. After unlocking the void engine's full potential, he had crushed every adversary in the sector. Even the mighty fleets of Huaye had bowed before his relentless advance. But this lone warrior, this Ethan, rendered inert every defense the Tao-Ti civilization had ever devised. On Xiu's holographic battle screen, red warnings blazed. One by one, his proud vessels drifted lifelessly, torn open by that unforgiving blade. Ethan hovered amid the wreckage, the starlight edge humming softly as if it had never struck. Whenever the Tao-Ti deployed a new void barrier, it bloomed and then snapped apart, cleaved at its very seam. Hishi's ancient tactics, unleashing Starline in a grand, sweeping onslaught, had once decimated Huaye's fleets in a single, terrifying stroke. Ethan's approach was far simpler, yet no less lethal. Hone in on the core of the enemy's defense, then cut through it with absolute precision. No auxiliary shields, no secondary fields, just the pure, penetrating clarity of starlight-made weapon. King Jiho's heart sank. No amount of void technology, no scale of fleet deployment could match this. As long as Ethan pressed forward with that unrelenting focus, the Tao-Ti would find no refuge among the stars. And so, confronted with a foe unlike any before, Shiho realized that this battle was already lost. Ethan had spent months refining his mastery of star life, weaving its power into his already formidable time and space techniques. In his duel against Qiangwei, it at first seemed that his opponent would carry the day. Qiangwei moved with lethal precision, forcing Ethan onto the defensive. But then Ethan tapped into star life. In an instant, a blade of pure celestial energy materialized in his hand, and with a single fluid stroke, he cleaved Qiangwei in half. Almost at once, Qiangwei's fourth-generation divine body surged with regenerative energy, knitting her wounds closed. Unfazed, Ethan activated his multi-space mapping once more. 3-star lives manifested around him like glowing constellations, empowering his next attack beyond anything Qiangwei had faced before. Even the distant onlooker, second Demon King Atuo, could not help but lean forward in amazement. Atuo's booming voice carried across the battlefield. Ethan's star life is utterly unpredictable. Qiangwei, beware. His praise was unmistakable. No one had wielded star life more skillfully than Ethan. Not even he, the famed former left-wing guard. Rumor had it that even the mighty Tianji king, Hexi, was less adept with such powers. Later, in a quiet pavilion on Kunsa Star, Yan and Morgana exchanged hushed words of their own. "Did you see how he fought?" Yan asked, eyes bright with excitement. "I've never known anyone to harness star life like that." Morgana smiled. That power wasn't a coincidence. Tianji King Hexi bestowed it upon Ethan himself, and he's long since calculated every step of this battle. Kunsa Star was just the beginning. Angel Yan hovered at the edge of Merlot Heaven's battlefield, the turquoise blades of her heavenly judgment blade crackling with contained power. She had been ordered to unleash a single, decisive strike, one that would obliterate Huaye, Ruoning, Morgana, and every insurgent daring to stand against Merlot Heaven. Unseen by all, that command came directly from Ethan, the heavenly king whose genius mind could fashion entire atoms of divinity. Ethan's true strength lay not in martial prowess or crushing force, but in the creative spark of his intellect. It was his mind, capable of devising sacred matter, that tipped the scales of every cosmic struggle. Only now did Angel Yan's cryptic report begin to make sense. When Ethan first unleashed the power of the star life, he had held back. He'd granted Ruoning a chance to steal a fragment of that stellar essence, an act that left Ruoning drunk on pride, convinced he could contend with the heavenly king himself. In truth, it was a lure, a carefully laid trap to bait the rival's hubris. But the battle lines were shifting. A far more formidable adversary had revealed itself, one that demanded Ethan's undivided attention. He no longer needed to dance around Ruoning's schemes. Without warning, and before Huaye could raise so much as a shield, Ethan reached across multiple dimensions at once. He laid out 10 distinct star paths, 10 separate destinies, and split his presence among them in an instant. From one vantage, the air itself seemed to pulse with living constellations. From another, Ethan's multiple forms pivoted in perfect harmony, each one a reflectee of his unbounded will. The battlefield grew still as cosmic energies converged upon him, and all eyes turned to witness the true measure of the heavenly king's mind made manifest. With the massive computational power of He-Shi's sky-based cloud network behind them, those 10 starships cut through their enemies with terrifying efficiency. Every major power in the known universe was watching this angelic civil war unfold. Morgana, for her part, held no illusions about who might win, because whoever did would inevitably come after her next. Why else would she have poured resources into building up her military? It was all preparation for the inevitable clash with the demons. After all, hundreds of thousands of lesser demons, cannon fodder though they were, could still slaughter countless angels and scum alike. This was the ultimate gamble, inferior steeds trouncing their betters. And no matter how many perished, Morgana felt no regret so long as they served their purpose. If Ethan hadn't sealed off the Chiwu system, Morgana would have escaped long ago. Now her only choice was to break into Angel Yan's defenses before her window closed. Then she heard the rumor that froze her blood. A black hole drive that can actually generate a miniature black hole? Morgana stared at the hollow screen in stunned disbelief. She needed an ally, and fast. With Carl's resources and her own connections, she was confident she could persuade him to help Huaye challenge Ethan. In the ensuing chaos, she would slip away unnoticed. It was a desperate plan, but in this war of angels and demons, desperation was often the only path to survival. Morgana leaned back in her throne room, weighing her options. Even if Hua couldn't defeat Ethan outright, she wouldn't grieve over his death. In fact, watching Ethan fall at Huaye's hands would be far more gratifying. She was certain that Karl, the god of death, had secretly built a failsafe into Huaye's gene engine, a hidden lever of control that only Morgana suspected. The very concept of a black hole engine had shattered her expectations and left her in stunned awe. If anything, it made Huaye's chances against Ethan seem just plausible enough to be dangerous. After all, Ethan's own power was beyond comprehension, especially given the dozens of third-generation war gods he had under his command. Morgana had no idea how he maintained such absolute authority over them. The title, King of Gods, sounded grand, but she knew how quickly such a throne could crumble. Even though she fully trusted her own methods of domination, she would never dare allow her subordinates to ascend to godhood so recklessly. Now, more than ever, Morgana needed to decide whether to strike at Ethan directly or pull Huaye's strings and watch the inevitable clash unfold. Chapter 248, Puppeteering Morgana. Morgana felt preyed upon from every direction, like a wolf stalking her front, a tiger closing in from behind, and a dragon circling overhead. In this dog-eat-dog cosmos, she realized there was nowhere to hide. She had once believed that by toppling Holy Kesha, she'd bought herself a reprieve. God King Ethan lay defeated, at least that was the rumor, and Death God Karl was supposed to be nothing more than a fallen corpse. Morgana told herself that as long as she steered clear of those two, she could live on her own terms. But the sudden reappearance of Huaye dispelled that fragile hope. Huaye coveted Morgana in a way that no one in the entire universe had dared to, even a discarded relic from some forgotten grave, much less a mere jester. In earlier days, Morgana would have laughed at such presumption. Now, she regretted with bitter clarity why she had once spared Huaye's life. Her mercy had become her undoing. Over the years, Huaye had ascended to godhood, merging his essence with a third-generation divine body and the fearsome black hole engine. From that fusion, he created Wielding, a new fourth-generation deity who personified the legendary Ansu Silver Martial Blade. Under Huaye's absolute control, Wielding now stood as an unstoppable force. Morgana's heart pounded. No dodge, no retreat, no trick seemed capable of subverting this latest threat. The very world she'd fought so hard to conquer was slipping through her fingers, and at the center of it all, Huaye pulled every string. Now she had to decide. Face the dragon in the sky, the wolf at her feet, and the tiger at her back, or perish trying. Sumali has now ascended to third-generation godhood and has joined forces with the Silver Blade. That means Morgana would have to face 2 third-generation gods and 1 fourth-generation god in concert. Such a triumvirate of divine power constitutes the most formidable super-god civilization in the known universe. Morgana cannot even envision a way to defeat them all. True, she has grown stronger thanks to Ethan's magical gene, but the Queen knows she could only handle one of these opponents at a time, at best. Wielding alone deserves the title of King-level warrior, aside from lacking the celestial-grade supercomputer that would officially crown her a sovereign. She matches any other king-level combatant in every other respect. Sumali, on the other hand, barely measures up to half the strength of a true king. Huaye ranks at the high end of king-level power, but when push comes to shove, he only equals an average king-tier fighter. 3 such king-level champions, tight in their cooperation, leave Morgana with no hope of victory through conventional means. Desperation finally drove her back to Ethan's side, petitioning once more for the Silver Blade. A queen born between heaven and earth cannot remain trapped in despair forever. Morgana could easily have assimilated into Kryptonian society. She even possessed the means to serve as one of its vassals, but she refused. She knew, with unsettling clarity, that Ethan felt nothing for her. To him, she was no more than a plaything. That realization kept her at arm's length. She was insecure in his presence and certain she could never truly captivate him. His heart was an unyielding fortress, colder than ice and harder than diamond. She had no wish to be reduced to a mere object of desire. Had Ethan harbored genuine feelings for her, Morgana might have toyed with him in return, but he didn't, and that notion left her profoundly uneasy. Then Karl, the god of death, slipped into the shape of a wraith and drifted silently away. At once, Morgana's calm facade shattered, her panic echoed in the empty halls. Ethan's divine allure was potent, but it wasn't an all-encompassing enchantment. He could charm her, little by little, but he was far too indifferent and too lazy to exert himself by weaving a permanent spell around her mind. Every time Morgana retreated to her own realm, she ran exhaustive self-checks on her body and soul. Her consciousness remained fully alert, online like a fortress under siege. If there was any anomaly in her thoughts, she'd detect it immediately and correct it. After all, barring the Void Engine's power to rewrite a king's very nature, no one could so easily bend a sovereign's will. And Morgana was determined that her mind would remain her own. When Ethan faced Morgana's request for the silver blade, he saw the flicker of fear behind her composed veneer. The fierce rivalry between Huaye and Heishi had rattled her confidence. She'd begged for the blade once before and failed so spectacularly that she hadn't returned until now. Despite her ruthless reputation, Morgana still observed certain lines. "You want the silver blade? Very well. Here." Ethan's generosity was anything but spontaneous. He was playing a careful game of manipulation, cold shoulder one moment, unexpected kindness the next. He knew the effect. A small favor offered at just the right time leaves a deeper impression than grand gestures. Morgana felt the trap snap shut. She hadn't expected him to relent, yet her pride demanded she accept his gift. The blade itself was no larger than a fruit knife, but its silver alloy and etched runes made it invaluable. In Morgana's hands, given her mastery of wormhole technology and multi-space mapping, this tiny weapon could unleash devastation on a scale few could imagine. Ethan held the slender blade out to Morgana. Its metal was the pure, smoky hue of dark silver. No embellishments, no hidden alloys, only a faint trace of iron that made scrying spells struggle to pinpoint its composition. "You're really giving me this?" Morgana's voice trembled with disbelief as she took the blade and inspected it from every angle. The surface was cool and unadorned, yet radiated a latent power that no divination could fully unravel. No runes, no secret wards. Just raw, uncompromising dark silver. Ethan's lips curved in a faint smile. He bent as if to reclaim the weapon, but Morgana's reflexes were faster. With a flick of her wrist, she plunged the blade into the shimmering portal of her dark plane pocket, a swirling wormhole that devoured the weapon before it even clanged against her armor. "Your Majesty, the God King, never breaks his word," she said, her voice all at once proud and awed. "I trust you." Morgana leaned forward, blue eyes alight. A single dark silver blade was no match for her beloved chains. She missed the coils that had once ensnared deities and demigods alike. Holy Kesha had shattered those chains, leaving her weaponless. Now, with this gift, she could carve her path anew. Ethan's calm voice cut through her thoughts. "A blade is enough. You'll find its edge as sharp as any chain." Morgana stared at him, speechless. In that charged moment, she realized that even stripped of her greatest weapon, she wielded something far more formidable, the unshakable promise of the God King. Ethan watched Morgana's retreating figure, the gleam of a newly acquired silver blade still clutched in her hand. She hadn't even glared at him for refusing more. She'd simply slipped away, utterly pleased with what she'd won. "Humph," she muttered to herself, pressing the blade's hilt. "A single silver blade. Better than I dared hope. My little performance paid off handsomely." Ethan turned his attention to the looming presence beside him, Karl, the god of death. He arched an eyebrow. "You made Huaye into a god. Are you planning to send him after me?" Karl's voice drifted through Ethan's mind in its usual cool cadence. "Relax. I have no intention of using Huaye against you." Back in her sanctum within Demon 1, Morgana let the blade sparkle in torchlight as she summoned Karl on their private link. She rolled her eyes, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Honestly, Karl, Huaye already has a void engine, and you just boosted Ruoning to a 4th-generation divine form. Meanwhile, Huaye himself remains a mere 3rd-generation divine being." Karl's reply came as quietly as a falling leaf. "Rest easy, Morgana. Huaye won't touch you." With that assurance, Morgana sheathed her prize and settled back, thoroughly satisfied with how the day had unfolded. Morgana's emerald eyes blazed as she slammed her fist on the table. "And that bitch Somali, she's already ascended to a 3rd-generation divine body. Does she really think he'll stand by while someone else claims the silver blade?" From the shadows, Karl, god of death, offered a calm nod. Relax. I've embedded a hidden backdoor in Huaye's genetic engine. Nobody will see it coming. Morgana arched a brow. Everyone in the Divine Circle knows how those engines operate. Is this really the sort of thing you announce so freely? With deliberate courtesy, Carl turned to Liang Bing. His voice was soft but carried the weight of inevitability. Trust me, Liang Bing. I mean you no harm. He paused, letting the words hang in the dim light. My only intention is to ensure justice is served. Carl's gaze flicked back to Morgana. Now that that's settled, shall we proceed? Chapter 249. Huaye, the Studious One. To demonstrate he held no hidden agenda, Carl, the Death God, laid his cards on the table. He confessed bluntly to Morgana that he could seize control of Huaye's actions at any moment. My only aim, he explained, is to have Huaye set his sights on Ethan. Morgana stiffened. If anyone else had tried such candor, she would have dismissed it outright. But Carl's reputation for secrecy made his admission all the more unsettling. Was he truly plotting against Ethan? Even if Carl had kept silent, Morgana could have pried the truth from Demon One. In fact, she had long anticipated some maneuver against Ethan. Yet now, confronted with Carl's confession, she found herself hesitating. Her attention flicked to the silver blade floating before her. The weapon hovered in midair, its twin edges flaring like bat wings. Morgana adored its demonic silhouette and would never part with it. Yet she distrusted its origins. Ethan had pressed the blade into her hand as casually as if it were a mere trinket, yet anyone of caution could see this was no ordinary steel. Dark iron veins wove through the metal, tinting its once silvery gleam with streaks of black. Such craftsmanship bespoke careful forethought, something Morgana could not ignore. She let the blade spin slowly between her fingers, pondering Carl's revelation. If the Death God truly held sway over Huaye, every move Ethan made would fall under Carl's shadow. And yet, why entrust Morgana with this knowledge now? As the black and silver steel caught the torchlight, Morgana resolved to find the answer. For in the game of gods and mortals, the sharpest blade often lay hidden in plain sight. What are you planning to do? Morgana's voice softened as she leaned forward, curiosity shining in her eyes. Death God Carl blinked, taken aback by her sudden warmth. He hesitated. According to the great clock's probabilities, the least likely outcome was Morgana betraying him. Yet somehow he sensed it was the most dangerous. Still, he forced a calm smile and replied, I'll have Huaye seize the Merlot Heavenly Palace, then marshal the Tianza army for our advance. Carl's tone grew almost gentle as he outlined every detail. Morgana listened intently, though not because she planned to act on his words. She simply didn't want Ethan to perish so soon, and she wouldn't miss the chance to claim a few more silver blades from him afterward. Would betraying the god of death trouble her conscience? She was the Demon Queen. Trivial scruples like that never crossed her mind. Meanwhile, in the Merlot Heavenly Court, she guided the star spirits through a delicate process of multidimensional mapping, charting hidden pathways across the cosmos. The roar of Ethan's 10-star formation tore through the void, vaporizing every Tau T dreadnought and Lupus-class battleship in its path. When the shockwave faded, only Admiral Huaye's flagship remained. From the command deck, Huaye watched in mounting horror as Ethan focused the full power of his 10-star assault on that lone vessel. Each pulse struck the void shield like a falling star, denting its integrity and pushing it to the breaking point. I don't know how long the void shield, gifted by Carl's turtle protege, can withstand this, Huaye murmured, turning to his chief engineer, Ruoning. Find a solution. Now! Panic crept into his voice. Minutes ago, Ethan had swept through the enemy formation, erasing hundreds of capital ships in the blink of an eye. Without the reinforced void matrix from Karna Turtle and the high-frequency energy feed from his black hole engine, Huaye knew his flagship would already be split in two. The Tiangong-class dreadnought had once been the pride of the fleet, now it felt hopelessly obsolete. Below him, the boarding skirmish still raged, a deadly dance of blades and gravitic pulses. But even as his pilots and marines fought, Huaye's attention was fixed on the weakening shield above. Then, with chilling calm, Ethan did the unthinkable. He produced a small, unfamiliar device. Fear gripped on Huaye's chest. If Ethan dared to activate that compact black hole generator at this range, it would annihilate the so-called Star Destiny threat in an instant. but it would also consume Huaye's flagship and everyone aboard. Under that silent looming menace, Huaye found himself rooted to the spot, unable to bring his own ultimate weapon to bear. Ethan's eyes were steady, his posture unhurried. Without firing another shot, he had forced the once mighty admiral into paralyzed submission and sealed the fate of the battle. Beyond visual range strike. Impressive. The sheer firepower battering the enemy fleet is almost overwhelming. Calculating void shield parameters for Huaye's flagship, uploading shield matrix, running breach algorithm, deploying shield crack protocol. Ethan isn't idle either. He knows the survival of Starlife hinges on one thing: piercing Huaye's so-called turtle shell, shield. Once that outer defense collapses, the black hole engine becomes moot. Even if the enemy unleashes its full dark matter drive, Ethan won't let it stand in his way. In a lesser story, you might call this a plot contrivance. After all, he commands a vast space-based cloud computing network that should never have left him helpless. But this void shield's resilience has exceeded every expectation. The calculations are fiendishly complex. Not even the combined power of the entire cloud array can crack it in seconds. "Don't worry, Commander Huaye," Ethan transmits, his tone calm. "I've seen this system before, during the Morgana engagement after Nolan of the Holy Left Wing fell in battle. Back then, I dispatched Starlife from more than 40 light-years away to neutralize exactly the same shield configuration." He leans forward, fingers dancing across the holo console. Somewhere deep in that fortress of light and gravity, that impervious barrier is beginning to show hairline fractures. And for Ethan, that's all the opening he needs. "We've been chasing Morgana across the void for years," Ruoning said, her voice low. "Unbelievable. That kind of power?" Huaye shook her head in disbelief. "The Angel Nebula spans a 50-light-year radius. He-She's stellar bombardment can blanket the entire nebula. The moment we step inside, there's no dodging her attack. And thanks to those wormhole conduits, she can teleport her bombardment right to our position." Ruoning frowned. "So what do we do? How do we fight back?" Huaye closed her eyes, steeling herself. "Back when I served as Queen Kisa's sacred left wing, I outranked even He-She, who was still on active duty then. Starlife was one of Kisa's ultimate weapons, and I had direct clearance to all related protocols and data." She looked up at Ruoning. "Because of my rank, every one of Kessa's weapons passed through me before deployment. It's true that He-She spent 10,000 years developing them, but her role was purely R&D. Tactical decisions and battlefield command always fell to Queen Kesa and me. At the time, Kesa granted me full authorization to deploy these arms if the situation demanded it." Ruoning absorbed the information in stunned silence, the weight of their predicament clear in her eyes. "All right," she finally said. "Then let's hear what options are on the table." Ruoning's reputation spoke for itself. She was the longest-serving angel in the host, and her combat prowess was unrivaled. Had Holy Kesha not suddenly called her home, she'd still be the revered Holy Left Wing. Yet here she was, proposing something that left even veteran scientist Huaye baffled. "What are you talking about?" Huaye asked, brow furrowed. "Explain it plainly." Ruoning rolled her eyes. "All right, I've charted the patterns of stellar destinies down to the smallest detail. I can codify that knowledge into a precise algorithm. Then you use your black hole propulsion engine to capture it." Huaye's eyes lit up. Capture a destiny algorithm with a black hole engine? That was either madness or genius, and Huaye was eager to find out which. "So you're saying I feed the star, our destiny data, into this void-based algorithm?" Ruoning leaned against the starship's railing, her tone matter-of-fact. "Exactly. Once you fire up the black hole engine, I'll deploy the program and literally entangle the star's fate in the algorithm. Then we can extract it, analyze it, whatever we need." Huaye nodded, already plotting calculations in his mind. It sounded audacious, but with Ruoning's track record, he was more than willing to give it a try. "Strike the moment I lock the star in my entanglement field. When its energy and data signatures dip," Ruoning instructed, his voice low and precise. "Feed in the void algorithm I uploaded to you, then fire up your black hole engine. That will let us remotely override the destiny code." He watched as his partner calibrated the targeting arrays. "Once we expose the code's parameters, we can rewrite it from the ground up. He-She won't be able to maintain control for long. At that instant, we snatched the destiny code for ourselves. Chapter 250, Prepare to Die. Ethan stared in disbelief. He couldn't wrap his head around the operation Wielding had just outlined. Remote infiltration? Didn't that require a physical link of some kind? How could they possibly breach an enemy stronghold from afar? Are you saying this is actually doable? He asked, incredulous. Wielding let out a derisive laugh. Of course it's doable, she replied. Once you've unlocked gene engine technology, remote access is child's play. Haven't you noticed that, despite breaching the Angel Coalition's first line of defense and wiping out countless enemy forces, we haven't encountered a single coalition ship, no blade cruisers, no orbital battle groups, nothing. She paced before him, voice growing colder. Do you honestly believe that Hexy and the Angel civilization, after centuries of advancement, would still be relying on those clunky aerospace-grade warships from the Angel Coalition? Ethan shook his head, the pieces finally clicking into place. He'd assumed defeating the Coalition would be straightforward. Aside from those 15 lethal Archangels, their fleet had always seemed antiquated, barely a nuisance. Now, he wondered, had Hexy simply underestimated them up to this point, until they stumbled on the true extent of his plans? Wielding fixed him with a steely glare. Underestimate us at your peril, Ethan. We've barely begun. If she really dispatches a Skyblade dreadnought or one of his orbital battlecruisers with my black hole engine and your high-frequency void drive on board, we could slip right into their systems and shut them down from within. Barring she personally taking the helm, no one could withstand our assault. Wielding inclined his head in agreement. It was the first time Ethan fully appreciated just how formidable and frightening Wielding truly was. Unfortunately, awareness alone changed nothing. They still lacked the resources to launch such an assault. Wielding knew Ethan's ignorance ran deeper than a simple unfamiliarity with alien tech. Even he wouldn't claim to understand all of celestial civilization's breakthroughs. Those secrets were the exclusive domain of He and the sacred Kesha. Liang Bing may once have been versed in some of those innovations, but she'd been away for years, and as she would have redesigned anything she'd known. As for Wielding himself, he'd defected only recently from his post as a guardian of the left wing. In so short a time, he'd seen no way to alter those massive, sophisticated systems on his own. Ethan's ignorance of void lore was astounding. He simply couldn't grasp many core concepts or techniques. None of it had ever even occurred to him. And yet, as a king and the supreme deity of a civilization, he ought to have been familiar with them. After all, every chief god under his rank had, over the millennia, mastered the bulk of their civilization's advanced technologies. Even the slowest mind could absorb that knowledge in time. Divine bodies, with their enhanced intellects, even more so. But Ethan had only just awakened as a third-generation divine body. His brain had expanded, true, yet he'd had neither the opportunity nor the resources to learn the Void's secrets. He sensed his memory growing sharper and his thought processes speeding up. But he never expected such yawning gaps in his understanding. To make matters worse, Karl, the god of death, flatly refused to teach him. Instead, Karl wrote a separate subroutine, an automated foolproof program that Ethan could run without thinking. It was a gift in appearance, but in truth it was a trap, the kind of crutch that could paralyze any deity's growth if they relied on it too long. Once someone becomes accustomed to simple, mindless tactics, it's almost impossible to break the habit. Huaye seemed blissfully unaware of this, or perhaps he just didn't care. He was thoroughly enjoying these foolproof strategies that required no real effort. Even a basic void energy strike could wipe out 99% of elite soldiers and warriors. What might happen if he leaned too heavily on this kind of power in higher-stakes battles? Death God Karl and Wielding shared a quiet agreement. They would keep Huaye from tinkering with or overusing the black hole engine. They understood that an unchecked appetite for such weapons could lead to disaster. Karl glanced at Huaye. In that case, could we just snatch one of those weapons later on? Say Ethan's? Huaye's eyes lit up. He'd never actually seen Ethan's arms cache in person, but Karl had shown it to him, side by side with Holy Kesha's arsenal. The two seemed evenly matched. Of course, at the time, Kesha hadn't yet produced anything on the level of the Starlife armaments, and Ethan had been holding back, reserving his full strength. But stealing one of those weapons? Now that idea was intoxicating. Impossible. Do you really think this is a game? Huaye's tone was sharp. Ruoning had expected his objection. She shook her head. Why not? We perform remote scans all the time. Any star's fate can be determined this quickly and at this distance. Huaye frowned. But you just told me you're fully versed in the Star Destiny Protocol and authorized to modify its algorithms. With that access, you could decode Ethan's powers yourself. And for anything beyond your expertise, we have my black hole engine. An ordinary weapon, say a common silver blade, would take virtually no time to analyze at its frequencies. Ruoning held up a hand. That's precisely why we cannot feed Ethan's signature into your engine. He's operating at a god-tier level. If we scan him with the black hole engine, we could unintentionally create a back door for him to infiltrate our systems. Carl confirmed it. Ethan wields a void engine of his own. Huaye's eyes widened. Ruoning pressed on. I've studied void theory extensively, but only at a surface level. Had I mastered it, I would have chosen a void engine for myself instead of relying on a fourth-generation divine body. Even the fourth-generation divine body, with its unmatched versatility, can't exceed its own limits without the void engine. The divine body grants balance. The void engine, miracles. Most warriors might favor the raw durability of the fourth-gen form, but Ruoning, a god hardened by centuries of warfare, knew his true power lay in the void engine's boundless potential. Huaye's breath caught. Hearing Ruoning speak so matter-of-factly, he recognized how much he'd overestimated himself. Even if he somehow mastered the black hole engine, he wouldn't stand a chance here. Ethan, too, wielded a void engine of unknown frequency. Huaye still clung to the old way of ranking strength by frequency alone, but he knew frequency was only the baseline. Countless other factors determined a warrior's true might. Besides, how many void-forged fighters had already fallen before Tauti? Ruoning slid a data module across the console. This is the upgraded algorithm. Hand over the Star Destiny, and you'll see our combat effectiveness multiply. The real question, Huaye said with a playful gleam in his eyes, is whether you'll hand over the Star Destiny and Queen Kaisha's armory when the time comes. Ruoning paused at the threshold, then turned back to him, her voice steady. Rest easy, Huaye. Surely you know who I am. To me, you're irreplaceable. A confident smile spread across Huaye's face. Excellent. Then let's begin. Ruoning met his gaze without hesitation. She understood exactly what she was risking, and she wasn't about to back down. Even as a sudden nosebleed, courtesy of her allergic rhinitis, streaked her fingertips with red, she refused to falter. There was work to do, and nothing was going to stop her. Chapter 251, Huaye's Conspiracy. He-She raised a single hand, and 10 star beacons flared to life overhead. In an instant, their shafts of light pierced the darkness, hurtling straight for Huaye's flagship. As the beams closed in, Ruoning stepped onto the command bridge, her expression calm but resolute. He-She's lips curled into a mocking smile. You think you can steal my star's essence? With a dismissive gesture, he activated his celestial cloud computing network, which had already run countless simulations of her every possible move, and chosen the result it deemed most likely. On his command, the targeted stellar life force disintegrated before her, vanishing into nothingness. Ruoning hovered in midair, stunned. Across the deck, Admiral Huaye stared up at her with rapt attention, as though waiting for her to explain the destiny of a star so vast and powerful. She hadn't seen this coming. Her plan had been simple. Catch He-She off guard, seize the initiative, and tip the balance in her favor. What she'd failed to realize was that every word she'd spoken, every subtle gesture she'd made, had already been cataloged and analyzed by He-She's cloud matrix. It had run infinite scenarios, filtered out the least probable outcomes, and weaponized its conclusions against her. Now there was no path to victory, unless an unexpected wildcard, someone like Ethan, burst onto the stage and overturned fate itself. Without that deus ex machina, He-She's judgment was absolute. Ruoning felt a cold certainty settle in her bones. According to this script, she had no way to escape the verdict he'd already rendered. Hexy's fleet bristled with newfound firepower. Only days ago, she'd risked everything, plunging through a black hole and scheming against Ruoning to weaken Liang Bing's position. With Ruoning now neutralized, Hexy had bought time to focus on her real priority, rescuing Angel Yan, the dishonored Angel King. Yan still bore the sacred Kesha, the legendary artifact of boundless power. If Liang Bing, once one of the three Angel Kings, managed to wrest that relic away, all would be lost. Her anxiety deepened when she remembered Liang Bing's allies. At his side stood God King Ethan, the most formidable warrior in all the realms. Beneath the surface, Ethan was quietly colluding with Karl, the dread god of death. If Yan fell into their hands, they could claim the Kesha, and with it, unchallenged supremacy. Hexy cut through her doubts. She had acted decisively before, and she would act decisively now. On the command deck, her voice rang out, "Execute judgment of heaven." Immediately, 4 generations of artificial god clones slid from their holding bays. Their mission, subdue Huaye and any lingering loyalists still siding with Ruoning. Then the flagship's ultimate weapon belched to life. The Judgment of Heaven punishment launched a blistering salvo, hundreds of crater-shattering warheads every second, straight at Huaye's command ship. Even its legendary Void Shield, the pride of the fleet, warped and faltered under the barrage. Each missile strike alone could vaporize a cruiser. Together, they made a single, undeniable statement. Cross Hexy, and you will be erased by the wrath of a combat celestial body unleashed. As the flagship trembled under another explosion, Hexy knew the battle for Angel Yan and the fate of the sacred Kesha had truly begun. One assault celestial vessel was enough to annihilate hundreds of space-class warships. Its defenses simply couldn't be breached. "Damn you, Shi!" Ruoning gripped the flagship's railing as the explosion rocked the deck. She'd never imagined Shi would actually do this. Why hadn't he unleashed the judgment of heavenly punishment when the Angel Alliance first clashed with the Celestial Slag Coalition? Why wait until now? What shook her even more was how effortlessly Shi had appeared outside their flagship. Huaye's eyes went wide. He'd never expected to face Shi in person. His legs trembled at the very name, not because Shi was some bespectacled old aunt, but because of the sheer force behind her legend. If Shi hadn't risen up when she did, the angels would still be enslaved by Tianja, and the celestial court would never have fallen. Even though Morgana and dozens more were exposed in the aftermath, the angels themselves remained cloaked in darkness. In the end, everyone knew the same brutal truth. Victors write history, and the defeated become enemies. No one claimed that justice always wins, or that the vanquished must be evil. Ethan's voice rang out across the shattered courtyard. "Remember, the victor gets the final say. Huaye, Ruoning, enough posturing. A ragtag coalition like yours wouldn't breach the celestial city in 1,000 years." He leaned against a broken pillar, every inch the arrogant sovereign. Sumali bristled at his words, snapping at Huaye. "Didn't you see that this so-called king is all talk?" Huaye spat back. "And you're just as helpless when you face me." Ruoning cracked his knuckles. "Spare me the insults. Next time we spar, it'll be a duel of true kings, and I'll send you skidding back to dust." Before Ethan could respond, the air trembled above them. A glowing seam ran across the sky. Heaven itself was opening. The relentless rain of divine judgment stuttered to a halt as Ethan slipped through the portal, disappearing from view. Seconds later, he reappeared on a floating terrace bathed in silver light. The heavenly gate stood wide open behind him, its twin stones carved with ancient runes. A hollow, ethereal voice whispered through the breach. "My liege, the void shield is down to 50%. Your adversaries await your decision." Ethan straightened. "Very well. You two," he called back down to the courtyard. "This ends now. Step forward and face me one-on-one, or fall by my hand together." Below, Ruoning's eyes darted toward his allies. He shouted, "Wang, are you coming?" Huaye's face went ashen. "You're not going to stand by me?" he demanded. Ruoning shrugged, his gaze never leaving Ethan. "Since when did Pax stop a lone king? I'll fight you fair and square. If you doubt my honor, say so, and I'll take him on by myself." A tense silence fell. The rain stilled. Somewhere in the smoke and ruin, the void shield flickered like a dying star. All that remained was the challenge. Who would step forward and prove themselves worthy of the crown? "Relax, King Huaye," Ruoning urged, her voice steady. "The Marrow Heavenly Court hasn't stripped you of your power yet. Don't underestimate your black hole engine or your third-generation divine body." Huaye shook his head, finally persuaded by her insistence. He'd rather swallow his pride than risk having his void shield shattered and then be killed outright. Muttering a silent curse, he angled his void jet toward the Tianmen. "Going without ruoning?" A voice called out as he approached the great gates. Beyond the Tianmen loomed the magnificent Palace of Heaven. Huaye barely registered its spired rooftops before He appeared in a shimmer of light, blocking his path. Wasn't this supposed to be a contest between kings? He smiled, his tone dripping with mockery. Cornered, Huaye braced himself. His black hole engine roared to life, scanning the empty expanse at breakneck speed, just in case He had some hidden trick up his sleeve. But He's grin only widened, as if daring him to act first. In that moment, Huaye knew, fearless boldness without true understanding was a fool's gambit. Huaye had been reckless enough to integrate the god of death Karl's genetic engine into his own body. He simply refused to believe Karl would do nothing. That conviction blinded him to the truth. This entire spectacle was nothing more than a psychic illusion. He'd never studied mental attacks, so he had no idea he was under one. In his mind, the void engine could be reprogrammed at will, but only with deliberate input, much like dragging files into a computer's recycle bin or hitting delete. Coupled with the black hole engine, he should have been able to obliterate every natural law with a thought. A mere psych. Hick Assault should never have felt this real. It was a pity he didn't understand any of it. Still, in that moment, he was certain he'd arrived inside the Heavenly Palace after the Great Shift, despite the fact that the mellow Heavenly Palace had long since relocated to another planet in a previous era. Believing he faced a genuine threat, he drew the heavenly sword and strode forward. "Come on," he growled, blade raised, then suddenly hesitated and let the sword fall to his side. He studied him with narrowed eyes. "Can anyone outside hear what we're saying in here?" Huaye pressed a fingertip to his temple, as if searching for the answer within himself, and remained silent. "Interesting. Is this your grand scheme to escape fate?" Huaye's question drew a low chuckle from Ethan. He knew, of course, that the death god Karl had been watching this duel all along. And now that the battle was spiraling out of control for both Huaye and Ruo Ning, Karl would inevitably step in. He might as well stand by and let the holy Kesha be torn to shreds. After all, toppling another He posed no real challenge for him. He'd already amassed a vast store of void matter. Chapter 252, He's Trap. Ethan barely registered Karl's assault. After all, Karl, the god of death, was the most formidable foe of all. Yet He must have foreseen this move. Whether she's grown overconfident in her mental illusions or whether she's cleverly laid a snare here to deliver Karl a crushing psychological blow remains to be seen. The god of scientific research is never static or predictable. Thanks to the butterfly effect of time travelers, even the grandest cosmic narratives can shift, and as a being of pure data and calculation, the god of scientific research continually recalibrates. It's inevitable, then, that He's own thoughts and strategies evolve in turn. Meanwhile, Huaye contemplated reaching out to He with a proposal. Why spill each other's blood when together they might stand a chance against far greater threats? Angelic civilization is no longer alone. From the overlords on the fringes of unknown space to the Kryptonian empire led by God King Ethan, from the unfathomable Deathsong Academy to Karl himself now stepping onto the stage, these are powers no single realm can hope to confront in isolation. Cooperation, Huaye believed, was not just preferable but necessary. Huaye was convinced that an alliance with He would serve them both, and he was even prepared to elevate the female angel's status in the Heavenly Palace to be fully equal with Tianza. All he asked in return was her help researching and mastering his black hole engine. To him, it was a fair bargain, but He refused outright. She was already confident of victory without his help, and she simply didn't trust his promises. Frustrated, Huaye doubled down. He offered her equal rulership alongside him, proposing a dual monarchy of male and female angel kings. Still, He stood her ground. Huaye seethed at her obstinacy. If she truly wanted parity, he thought, she might as well have sought out Ethan instead. After all, Ethan carried the galaxy power supergene, his claim to leadership was unassailable, and in every respect, Huaye paled beside him. Yet there was one hitch. Ethan's Kryptonian super warriors and divine hosts counted no women among their ranks. That fact gave he-she pause, and for a moment she hesitated. In the end, however, negotiations collapsed. Denied her cooperation, Hua-Ye resolved to force the issue. But before he could make his move, he-she struck first. She unleashed a precise incantation that disabled his black hole engine at its core. The device stuttered and fell silent, and suddenly Hua-Ye found himself desperately off balance, facing the consequences of underestimating his would-be ally. Ethan's trump card was the black hole engine, an advanced, high-frequency void drive built into his third-generation divine body, the Styx variant. Unlike its more versatile counterparts, the Styx version traded flexibility for raw, up-close power. It excelled in melee and boasted formidable durability, though its cognitive enhancements were deliberately curtailed by Karl, the god of death, to keep pilots focused on combat rather than overthinking. As an ageless veteran, Ethan adapted quickly to these constraints, until he faced he-she. Their duel began as expected. Ethan unleashed the black hole engine, drawing on the Void's crushing force to overwhelm her. But he-she, wielding far greater reserves of dark energy, struck back not with raw power, but with a subtler weapon, a labyrinth of mental illusions. Rather than hacking the engine's systems outright, something even her enormous energy couldn't accomplish, she infiltrated Ethan's mind, warping his perceptions. To him, every command he issued went unanswered. Every calibration attempt returned errors. He was convinced the black hole engine had seized up. In reality, no true shutdown occurred. He-she had simply introduced logical inconsistencies into his neural interface, misdirecting the activation protocols so they never reached the engine. Any third-generation divine body pilot with sufficient technical know-how could have unraveled her deception and brought the drive back online. But Ethan, caught in her psychic snare, found himself disarmed, his most potent weapon rendered unusable by a trick of the mind. Ethan's ribs ached with each brutal strike. He-she's mocking grin widened as she launched him across the void like a rag doll. Blood spattered against drifting asteroids, but before he could gather himself, a colossal skull, its hollow eyes burning like dying stars, blazed into existence between them. "I've been waiting for you." The skull boomed, its voice resonating through the angel nebula. He-she's eyes flickered with annoyance. She raised an arm, channeling raw spatial algorithms into the air. Though she lacked a personal void engine, her status as a king-class main god let her exploit every shred of ambient space-time energy. Runes of light snaked around her fingers as she began to remotely isolate and define the skull's coordinates. At first, the giant bone visage shuddered, crystallizing in place. But then its empty eye sockets flared, and the thousands of surrounding stars dimmed in protest. Ethan could almost hear the frantic whir of anti-intrusion protocols inside his mind as the skull's own defenses countered he-she's analysis. Each second, the computational load spiked to astronomical levels. From the void's edge, Karl, the grim god of death, intervened. With a turn of his colossal chronoclock, he siphoned every spare cycle from his research grids, pausing half a dozen experiments to bolster the fight. His gravelly voice crackled through Ethan's neural uplink. "Ethan, fire your black hole engine. Send a void computing strike." Ethan groaned, trying to bring his battered arms into alignment. "Karl, my engine's offline." He-she disabled it the instant that skull appeared. Karl's mortar-deep laugh echoed around them. "Then we improvise. Draw on whatever remnants of void matter you still control. We'll collapse its defiances from the inside out." He-she eyed them both, lips curling. "You'll need more than scraps of void dust to breach my defenses." Without warning, she surged forward, the surrounding space folding in on itself. Shadows coalesced into spiked tendrils that roared toward Ethan, each one humming with destructive, unprocessed code. Ethan swallowed the pain, ignited the last reserves of his fractured engine, and hurled a swirling sphere of darkness at the skull's temple. Time itself warped and buckled around it. For a moment, the void between worlds trembled, and then the skull fractured, shards of bone and code cascading into oblivion. He-she staggered back, eyes wide. Even in her shock, though, she smirked. The real battle, she made clear, was only just beginning. "Can we still disable it?" Hua-Ye's heart leapt when Karl's voice crackled through the link. He felt as triumphant as a buyer who'd finally exposed a vendor's shoddy workmanship. Your black hole engine was never actually shut down, he declared. She only tricked your senses, creating a mental illusion. I've just finished an algorithm that will force the engine to unleash a high-frequency void energy blast. Carl, the god of death, inclined his skull-like head in acknowledgement. Earlier, she had been locked in combat with Carl's void-forged weapon when Huaye's code went live. In an instant, the mental mirage fell apart, and Heishi's fourth-generation god clone collapsed, its systems fried by the onslaught of void energy. High-frequency void bursts of that magnitude can disintegrate a divine vessel and shatter sacred atoms, and, mercifully, Heishi's clone simply shut down rather than exploding. At that moment, Carl's skeletal weapon lunged forward and swallowed the inert god clone in one ravenous gulp. Problem solved? Huaye asked, barely able to contain his excitement. Carl's hollow laughter echoed. Not quite. She may be down, but you can't kill a fourth-generation god so easily. At best, we can exile him to the edge of a black hole, stranded in the void, powerless to interfere. Silence fell as the two conspirators contemplated the enormity of their achievement and the vast lawns, Elenis awaiting their enemy at the universe's most remote frontier. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he crouched behind the shattered remains of the temple wall. Splintered pillars and cracked marble lay strewn across the courtyard, glittering in the crimson glare of the dying sun. Somewhere beyond the smoke and ruin, the supernova was beginning to bloom, and if it bloomed fully, this world would be annihilated. You must hurry. Carl's voice crackled through Ethan's comlink, calm but heavy with urgency. The death god hovered on the brink of the blast zone, every inch of his pale skin etched with runes of warding. We can't hold much longer, Ethan swallowed. He glanced toward Holy Kesha, who hovered at the far end of the courtyard. Her wings of silver light shimmered with exhaustion. They both knew how powerful she was. She could have fled long ago, or shattered Delane in a single blow. Yet here she remained, gathering her strength for a final gambit. Above them, the heavens roiled. The star at the planet's core had gone critical. A supernova was inevitable, unless someone, or something, could snuff it out from within. Delena's shield still stands, Kesha murmured, fingers tracing the air as she wove protective sigils. We can't breach her defenses without a void frequency strike. Carl's obsidian eyes glinted. I can exile her to the black hole edge with the Grand Clock's power and the Skull Void weapon, he said, but I can't destroy her there. She'll simply reform. This fourth-generation divine body, it's unbreakable by any known means. Huaye, crouched in the shadows beside Ethan, bit his lip. Carl's readiness to deploy such a desperate tactic unnerved him, yet he dared not voice his doubts. Instead, he monitored the anti-void engine he'd spent months refining. If it activated in time, it could dampen Delena's defenses long enough for Kesha's final strike. She's avatar flickered into view, every pixel of her ethereal form alive with calculated menace. Her face was impassive, but Ethan felt the weight of her intellect. I underestimated Huaye's device, she confessed, voice devoid of emotion. My analysis was only 1% complete before that explosion disrupted my calculations. She advanced, the air bending around her as she focused on two goals: complete her void frequency synthesis and eliminate every obstacle before the supernova fully ignited. Ethan rose to his feet, drawing the celestial blade at his side. Though still untested, its edge was said to slice through the fabric of space itself. He called out, voice firm, this ends now. A tense silence fell. Above, the star's surface cracked like fractured ice. Light streamed through, binding the world in an unholy embrace. Kesha's wings shimmered, Carl's wards flared, and Huaye's engine whined to life. All that stood between the universe's birth of destruction and its salvation was this final, desperate gambit. With a roar that shook the heavens, Ethan charged forward, ready to carve a path through destiny itself. One of the mission's goals was to grant Ethan an essentially infinite subjective stretch of time he could spend inside the Void Engine's event horizon, so that she could thoroughly analyze the black hole drive. To Ethan, it felt as though only an hour had slipped by. In reality, nearly a month had passed. That was more than enough time for she and her team to dissect every aspect of the engine, run simulations, and work out a reliable method for destabilizing it. Encounters with a fully mature Void engine were vanishingly rare in the known universe, and Heishi had spent years preparing for exactly this opportunity. The plan's second objective was equally critical, to use Ethan as bait to draw out the death god, Carl. With Ethan trapped in the engine, the project leaders hoped Carl would reveal himself and make a move that would expose his hiding place. Only by luring Carl into the open could they hope to stop him once and for all. Chapter 253, The Purpose of Death. God Carl, both the first and second objectives had failed. No sooner had Ethan activated the time-dilated layer of his spiritual sense than Death God Carl struck, directly and without warning. Every defensive measure Ethan deployed against Carl was shattered in an instant. He clenched his teeth. I seriously underestimated Huaye's black hole engine. Spinning on the brink of collapse, Ethan re-established his link to the fourth-generation God clone. The enemy assault had knocked out all of the clone's gene engine modules, but its built-in divine chassis proved astonishingly resilient. The moment Ethan reconnected, the clone's anatomy began to self-repair. At the same time, somewhere beyond Ethan's reach, Huaye had already broken through the mellow heavenly court's outer defenses with Ruoning and the others at his side. Although the court's angels fought valiantly, they were no match for Huaye's ruthless precision. He seized the priceless Tiangong artifact and withdrew, yet not before deploying his ultimate deterrent. Anticipating Ethan's swift counterstrike, Huaye scattered a web of micro-black holes throughout the compound. Each miniature singularity pulsed with hungry gravity. If left unchecked for 1,000 light hours, they would tear the entire mellow heavenly court apart from the inside. Now Ethan faced a desperate choice. He had just enough residual power to contain Death God Carl's assault, but if he didn't first neutralize Huaye's black holes, the court's occupants would be annihilated before he could return. Ethan's jaw tightened. He would have to split his strength, confronting both cosmic horrors at once. Failure was not an option. Releasing a low, resonant hum, Ethan prepared to extend his divine will across space and time. The countdown had begun. Ethan had done the impossible. He'd reclaimed the Tiangong. He hadn't yet settled scores with Heishi or brought down Melo Tiantianting, but by revealing his name at that decisive moment, he rallied millions of Tianja warriors to his side. Simply wrenching the Tiangong from Melo Tianting's grasp while Heishi stood guard rekindled hope across the realm. Even a partial victory like this proved the fight was far from over. As the Tianza legions poured in, the world caught its first real glimpse of the former heavenly sovereign's might. Legions of super soldiers whose numbers seemed almost mythic. With their support secured, Ethan proclaimed himself king of the Tianja. He refused to claim the angel throne just yet. Melo Tianting still stood, but this was a vital start. The foundations of his power were now stable. The next step would be to strengthen his forces and press the advantage until the true throne could be won. Ethan studied the data streaming across his command console. Wars between gods rarely end quickly. On a cosmic scale, a millennium is but a breath, 10,000 years barely a sigh. Yet Ethan could not allow this war to linger for even a fraction of that time. If it dragged on until the Holy Kesha's prophesied return, the consequences would be unimaginable. He already commanded millions of Tianza warriors. His strategy was clear. First, secure a convenient sector of space and begin harvesting its genetic resources. Scavenged from countless civilizations were so-called primitive supergenes, raw, untamed sequences brimming with potential. Ethan planned to isolate the very best specimens, then feed them into his supercomputers. There, guided by adaptive algorithms, these alien genes would mutate, evolve, and eventually merge with the Tianza genome, creating a new generation of near-godlike soldiers. In practice, however, the process was agonizingly slow, without celestial-grade computational power. Even the ancient angelic civilization had spent tens of thousands of years refining their own biogenetics, so much so that angels and male angels diverged into entirely separate species. To compress that kind of evolutionary leap into mere centuries, Ethan needed an extraordinary catalyst, the aid of the death god, Carl. Without Carl's uncanny ability to manipulate life and death itself, the rebirth of the Tianja on the timetable Ethan demanded would be all but impossible. Now, as the war's fronts shifted and rival gods mobilized, the known universe stood at a crossroads. Alliances trembled, ancient powers stirred, and at the heart of it all was Ethan's bold, unprecedented experiment. Its success would forge an unstoppable force, or, if it failed, unleash chaos beyond imagining. Ethan spent more than 10 days dismantling the black holes. He never had to plunge into one himself. His study of the black hole engine, though brief, yielded just enough insight to neutralize each device from a distance. Because every black hole was set on a delayed activation timer, Ethan enjoyed a comfortable margin for error. Once those threats were diffused, however, he found himself at a loss. He had planned a decisive, surgical strike against Huaye and Ruo Ning, and a crippling mental assault on the death god Karl himself. Yet Karl never materialized in his true form. He remained nothing more than a phantom, immune to the suppression algorithms Ethan had carefully prepared. Worse still, Huaye had reclaimed the Tiangong vessel, and in under a month, millions of Tianscom forces had descended, eagerly awaiting the moment to strike. "We shouldn't have let so many Tianscom survive in the first place," one young angel muttered, eyes heavy with regret. Ethan merely shook his head. The tangled threads of history had made it impossible to eradicate every Tianscom at the outset. Now he faced a new, daunting challenge, turning the tide against an enemy that knew exactly what to expect. Ethan leaned back in his command throne, reviewing the fading records of the Great War. On paper, the angels had won, but in truth, it was a hollow, Pyrrhic victory. If the fighting had dragged on, they would simply have driven themselves to extinction. And what of the millions of Tianscom waiting in the wings, their raw power untapped? With Mellow Heaven's vast reserves and the veteran angels returning from retirement, raising and upgrading a force of 100,000 was well within reach. The real question now was strategy. Launch a rescue mission for Angel Yan or strike preemptively at Huaye. On the surface, Huaye seemed reluctant to draw his blade, but he remained nothing more than a pawn of death god Karl. If Karl ordered him to turn on Mellow Heaven, how could he refuse? So far, Huaye hadn't been pushed beyond his limits. Yet Ethan understood precisely why Karl had unleashed him. The death god coveted the power of those millions of Tianscom. If he'd merely needed a few void warriors, he could have summoned them individually, warriors without the tangled loyalties and doubts that bound Huaye. Some truths, Ethan thought, were too clear to ignore. She still wasn't certain what death god Karl was really after, and that uncertainty chilled her more than any enemy blade. If she led the angelic host into the holy war to rescue Angel Yan, she knew Huaye would join the fight, and under Karl's command, no less. Then the angel coalition would be trapped between three armies. The demons on one side, the scum legions on another, and the forces of the Styx Nebula striking from the rear. Even if the angels somehow triumphed, their civilization would be so battered they wouldn't survive the aftermath. Her only loophole lay in defying Holy Kesha's justice edict, resurrecting every fallen angel, even if it meant tearing down the divine order itself. Such a gambit might secure victory, but it would shatter angelic unity. If King Tianji led the charge against the core tenets of their faith, wouldn't that alone fracture their society beyond repair? Ethan, however, understood death god Karl's purpose with deadly clarity. Karl wasn't interested in mere conquest or vengeance. He aimed to trigger the Void Era itself. His plan was nothing short of catastrophic. Unleash black holes across the cosmos until all reality unraveled. Anyone who stood between him and that final reckoning, whether to protect Reina or to defend the Liang civilization, was marked for annihilation. Liang Bing was no exception. Yet the death god Karl had no wish to destroy her. Imprisonment would serve his purpose just as well. Having already bent millions of despairing souls to his will through his control of Huaye, Karl's true target lay not with the Merlot celestial court, but with the sun civilization of Liang and its ruler, Emperor Lena. Ethan's blockade of the Chiwu star system, stretching even into the Milky Way, had severed Karl's line of sight to Reina, forcing him to abandon that chase for now. Instead, he turned his full might on the Liang. After all, the Milky Way itself was effectively claimed by the Kryptonian civilization, an adversary Karl wasn't yet bold enough to confront. The Sun civilization, by contrast, was exposed and vulnerable, its defenses brittle enough that conquest would be swift and assured. Chapter 254, Ethan Stirs Trouble. Beneath the shimmering expanse of the Angel Nebula, an armada blazed more brilliantly than the distant stars. Countless warships, each hull aglow with energy signatures, dotted the void, their lights turning the darkness into a tapestry of color. Tauti patrol skimmers and sleek Tianza cruisers wove through the fleet, ever vigilant. On the deck of a vast space battleship, its superstructure fashioned after an ancient galleon, soldiers from every allied race stood in perfect formation. The armored Tauti warriors, the hulking giant wolves, and the infamous scum of heaven. A herald's voice rolled across the comm channels. "Attention all male angels and your progeny scattered throughout the cosmos. King Ethan has returned to Tiangong. Surrender your defiance, renew your fealty, and continue to deliver the finest genetic resources to the throne. In return, you shall be granted crowns of your own and restored to the former glory of Tiangong." Ethan himself sat upon the crystalline throne, his presence commanding and resolute. Draped in ceremonial robes that caught every shard of light, he looked every bit the monarch reborn. A sudden flutter of wings drew his gaze. Ruoning landed before him, her ebony feathers folding neatly at her back. With a graceful bow, she spoke. "My king, Lord Karl has dispatched a request. He insists we lead the Tiangong legions in an assault on the Liang civilization." Ethan's jaw tightened. Liang. The name alone carried the weight of centuries-old rivalries. He leaned forward, thoughtful, every line of his regal bearing sharpening into resolve. "Tell my grandson Ethan to hold off," Huaye said impatiently. Now that he'd reclaimed the heavenly realm, he was no longer drifting in the void, and his sovereign spirit was fully restored. He needed to keep Ethan under his thumb long enough to gauge his limits. "I doubt Ethan can wait much longer." Ruoning shook her head. "If we can't afford to wait, then we simply must. Do you really think toppling the Liang civilization is as easy as flipping a switch?" Huaye waved away her objection. "On another note, find a way to persuade Kalnar's turtle grandson to grant Kunpeng, Mavis, and the others third-generation divine bodies. We can't let you and Sumali steal all the glory, and if he refuses, well, we'll figure out another approach." There was a contradictory edge to Huaye's orders, both imperious and meek, but Ruoning said nothing. As a fourth-generation divine being, she had no fear of Kunpeng or Mavis. Even if they, too, ascended to godhood, they posed no threat to her place in the pantheon. She simply inclined her head and prepared to carry out the king's commands. Ethan paced the dimly lit command chamber, his fists clenched at his sides. Across from him, Ruoning studied the hollow projection of Merlot Heavenly Court hovering above the table. "We're simply too weak to crack Merlot's defenses," Ruoning said, tracing the court's radiant spires with a single fingertip. "If we don't find a way to amplify our strength, we'll never make headway. And the third-generation divinities aren't standing still. They grow more formidable by the day." Ethan's jaw tightened as memories of his own downfall flared in his mind. "Karl won't hand over that power willingly," he replied. "If we field too many top-tier Tianju, he loses control. His aim is total dominance over the Tianju ranks. A dispersed power base undermines that." Ruoning's eyes gleamed with resolve. "Then we'll build our own army." Ethan straightened, determination settling over him like armor. "The Void Engine is already the apex of known technology," he reminded her, recalling the devastating gravity well of the black hole drive he'd once mastered. "Given our resources, we could reverse engineer and enhance it. But at best, we'd create pseudo-third-generation super soldiers. They'd be strong, but not invincible." "A pseudo-third gen is still a third gen," Ruoning insisted. She leaned forward, voice steady and urgent. "Any fragment of that power tilts the scale as in our favor. We can't settle for half measures. What we need now is unassailable strength." Ethan's eyes flared with resolve. "Then that's exactly what we'll give them." Ethan had no desire to argue with Huaye about how generations meant nothing for real fighting prowess. Still, there was no harm in rolling out a few counterfeit third-generation super soldiers. They'd only serve as window dressing, so he let it go. What surprised him was that Karl, the god of death, didn't refuse Huaye's request. To Karl, such distinctions were irrelevant. He cared only about results. And if Huaye took the equipment but then balked at the mission, Karl could simply seize control of him and his subordinates. After all, a deity like Karl would never leave those divine bodies and genetic engines free of backdoors. Ethan suspected as much, Carl's uncharacteristic eagerness was proof. Now Ethan found himself torn. He had intended to use Huaye as the linchpin for restoring the golden age of the Heavenly Palace, and to finally establish true equality between male and female angels. But if everything was simply going to become Carl's Heavenly Palace, Carl manipulating Huaye, who in turn manipulated Tianza, then what role would Ethan himself play? As it turned out, Carl eventually bent Tianza to his will through Sumali, leaving Ethan to watch his plan unravel under the god of death's shadowy influence. Ethan stood in the moonlit courtyard, his bat-winged silver blade resting casually at his side. From her vantage point behind a pillar, Liang Bing had been eagerly awaiting a showdown between He Shi and Huaye, two fighters whose reputations practically guaranteed fireworks. Instead, the pair had traded a few polite blows, then abruptly called it quits and walked off in opposite directions. Liang Bing groaned. What a waste of a good spectacle. She tried to slip away, but Ethan's cold gaze pinned her in place. Ever since he'd gifted her that extraordinary silver blade, its edge tuned to slice through enchanted armor, she'd been utterly enchanted. More than once he'd used subtle flattery and carefully timed favors to draw her in. In PUA circles, they'd call it the velvet trap, and it had worked like a charm. Recently, she'd found herself bright-eyed and eager whenever he appeared, even though he still treated her more like a curiosity than a companion. Frankly, she didn't mind. His indifference only proved he saw her as something more than just another mortal. And if feigned interest was what it took to secure his goodwill, so be it. Compared to Carl, the god of death, who gave her anything she asked for without hesitation, Ethan's slow-drip generosity felt almost romantic. She cherished that silver blade more than any of Carl's grand gifts, so much so that she'd secretly installed a small engine along its spine, hoping to harness its power in new, unpredictable ways. Tonight, as He Shi and Huaye melted into the shadows, Liang Bing realized she'd stick by Ethan as long as she could. After all, one never knew when a quiet evening might turn into the most rewarding battle of all. Your Majesty, there's unusual activity coming from the Kryptonian civilization. Sword Demon Atuo's voice was calm as he knelt before Queen Morgana, his hand resting on the hilt of his bat-winged silver blade. He had seen her lost in thought more times than he could count, fingers idly tracing the sword's dark runes. Still, whenever Morgana wanted updates on Krypton, she summoned Atuo instead of Geishalun, now in such demand in the demon realm, and he carried out her orders without complaint. Morgana's eyes flickered with interest. Go on. Atuo sheathed his blade with a soft click. They've just broadcast a cryptic message across the known universe. A cryptic message? The queen raised an elegant brow. What did they say? Atuo inclined his head. They announced that the Kryptonian civilization will henceforth be called the Tiandao civilization. More astonishingly, they've officially proclaimed God King Ethan as the ruler of the Milky Way. Morgana's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Ethan again, he never misses an opportunity to stir the pot. Atuo merely nodded. Indeed, my queen, but this declaration will ripple through every Shenhe nation and every beast clan in the galaxy. They're positioning Ethan not just as a conqueror, but as a divine sovereign over all cosmic order. Morgana leaned back on her throne, her gaze drifting toward distant constellations. Let them speak their bold words, she murmured. With Ethan's ambitions now laid bare, all eyes will turn toward the Milky Way, and when his true purpose is revealed, we will be more than ready. Atuo rose smoothly to his feet. As you command, my queen. He bowed once more, then slipped away to carry her will to every corner of the demon realm. The stars themselves seemed to watch in silent anticipation of the storm God King Ethan was about to unleash. A thunderous voice rang out through the void. The Milky Way will not tolerate illegal incursions. Any trespasser, no matter how distant, will face swift judgment. Mercy will not be granted. Ethan stood unmoved as his proclamation faded. Everyone knew that galactic power was destined to become the supreme deity of this galaxy. To the angels, and especially to He Shi, there was nothing untoward about Ethan's boldness. After all, he carried the galaxy power supergene in his veins. Still, not everyone agreed with him. When someone asked why he'd abandoned his old name and adopted Tiandao, he answered simply, it was a matter of staking his claim early. Tiandao had a grand, resonant weight to it, whereas Krypton civilization sounded almost provincial by comparison. Liang Bing watched him, puzzled. The name change didn't affect her in the slightest, so why did it bother her? She stepped forward and lightly touched his arm. "Why Tiandao?" she asked, genuinely curious. Ethan met her gaze with a calm smile, as if he had all the time in the universe to explain. Chapter 255. You treasure it. I treat it like trash. Ethan strolled down the marble corridor, flanked by Liang Bing. After a moment's silence, Liang Bing finally spoke up. "Ethan, why did you change the name of our civilization?" Ethan glanced at him coolly. "The king preferred Tiandao over Krypton. It pleases him. What business is it of yours?" Before Liang Bing could answer, Angel Leng swept into view, arms crossed and lips curled in a mocking smile. "Wow, roast chicken Bing is in a foul mood. Did someone slip an ice cube into your tea?" Liang Bing's expression darkened. "Don't call me that." Angel Leng shrugged as if she couldn't care less. "Look, if I'm stuck here as your guardian angel, I demand my smoothies and icy drinks, no exceptions." Liang Bing rolled his eyes. "I see. You only bothered to come back because Ethan fancied a cold drink." Angel Leng's tone turned frosty. "Exactly. I'm not happy about it, but I'm here now, and by the stars, I'm having my cold treats." Ethan held up a hand to break up the bickering. "All right, enough. No more arguments about cold beverages. Let's move on." He turned on his heel and led the way down the corridor, leaving Liang Bing and Angel Leng to stew in mutual annoyance. Ethan leaned back, a slow smile playing on his lips. "You know," he began, "when Du Changwei and Liang Bing made their debut, they called themselves the Ice Sculpture Rose. And despite Angel Leng's fierce reputation, whenever she teamed up with Liang Bing, the fans jokingly dubbed them the Bing Bing Duo." Liang Bing frowned but said nothing. All she could think about was how their combined exploits, Ethan's personal log now running past 10 million words, had ended with both her and Angel Leng lying dead at the story's climax. She studied Ethan's face through narrowed eyes. "Then tell me this, is Tiandao civilization really its name?" Ethan's expression stiffened. "Kryptonian civilization was just a facade," he admitted quietly. "The true empire is Tiandao, my empire, but I've never styled myself as the Emperor of Heaven. I call myself the King of God." Liang Bing tilted her head, unconvinced yet strangely indifferent. "Truth or lie, it makes no difference to me." Across the command bridge, Lianfeng replayed their private exchange in his mind, a storm of confusion churning in his chest. Tiandao civilization. Again? He remembered that long ago, the Liang civilization had been named Tiandao before rebranding itself as Liang. And now this so-called Kryptonian empire had adopted the very same name, even christening their colossal warworld Supreme Heaven. He closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. Another Tiandao? In this endless web of cosmic politics, could any name ever hold a single, stable meaning? Across the known universe, there are 3 great celestial courts: the Yunxiao court of the Liang civilization, the Mellow court of the Angel civilization, and, towering above them all, the Supreme Heaven. This colossal warship rivals Blue Star in sheer mass and will serve as both flagship and capital world for the Tiandao civilization, much as the Mellow court anchors the angel realms. Unlike the Mellow court, however, which is short on female angels and whose veteran warriors now disperse across the Angel Nebula's worlds, I wonder whether Ethan's Tiandao civilization will one day scatter its super soldiers and deities throughout the galaxy as well. If so, it will only make Xinjiao's path to becoming the galaxy's Lord God all the more arduous. Lianfeng frowned. Xinjiao was their final hope, the galaxy's ultimate power. He was nothing like Jie Xiaolun. Though a bit headstrong, Xinjiao remained dutiful, eager to learn, and willing to push himself. With Angel Ji Shin's patient guidance already set in motion, his destiny had been carefully charted long ago. Chapter Text: The Shift of Powers. Even if Jie Xiaolun's body had been infused with angel genes, nothing about the pressing time dilemma had changed. Who could say for certain how long that angel DNA might hold, or whether Angel Yan could somehow restore Jie Xiaolun entirely? What none of them expected was that the galaxy power would bypass Jie Xiaolun altogether and flow instead into the young warrior Xin Zhao. Angel Jishin stared at the energy readouts in confusion. She had no one to turn to for guidance. Sister Yan had been kidnapped by Morgana months ago. Her survival now remained a cruel uncertainty. Her master was far too engrossed in the war effort to notice his lone apprentice's plight. Left with no choice, Jishin threw herself into two tasks: mastering the delicate interface between the Dexing rifle and the newly awakened galaxy power, and tutoring Xin Zhao in its use. With every calibrating surge of light, she hoped she was one step closer to solving the puzzle of this unprecedented bond. Elsewhere, Commander Lianfeng read General Ducao's final orders again and again, steeling herself for the long struggle that lay ahead. She had sworn to carry out his dying command, no matter how convoluted the path might prove. Then Ethan arrived, and with him came everything Lianfeng had not foreseen. Du Qiangwei, having received an urgent summons from the Supreme Heaven itself, strode into the command chamber. She had assumed the order had originated with Ethan until he gently shook his head. "No," he said, voice calm but firm. "This came directly from Supreme Heaven, bypassing all of us." A hush fell over the assembled officers. Orders from the Supreme Heaven were absolute. To question them was inconceivable. Yet none understood why their highest authority had chosen this moment to speak. Ethan's blue eyes swept the room. "They demand we realign our forces around the new galaxy power bearer, Xin Zhao. They want us to accelerate our timeline, prepare to strike at Morgana's heart before she can use Sister Yan as leverage." Lianfeng swallowed hard. The general's dying wish had been patient preparation. Now, Supreme Heaven insisted on swift action. Angel Jixin stepped forward. "I've just synchronized the Dexing rifle to Xin Zhao's aura. He's ready, for better or worse." With that, they all turned toward the holomap, flickering in the center of the chamber. A new plan was already taking shape. The delicate threads of fate had shifted once more, this time under the direct hand of the Supreme Heaven itself. And so, as the stars wheeled overhead, they readied themselves to move. The race against time had entered its most perilous phase yet. "Rose, I intend to make you the very force of the galaxy." The words hit Rose like a shockwave. She stared at Ethan, utterly speechless. Become the embodiment of the galaxy power herself? All her life, she'd been drilled on its importance, first by her father, then by Aunt Lianfeng. She'd even heard Ethan describe the marvels of the Kryptonian civilization. And now here was the Tiandao Empire, once contemptuous of the galaxy power, announcing its plan to mass-produce it? Lady Lianfeng had never believed Rose's warnings. Her deeply rooted values were not so easily overturned. Rose understood that skepticism. Yet she had always assumed that deciphering the galaxy power would take centuries, hundreds of years at best. Not even a single month had passed since the breakthrough. "See, can I really do this?" Rose murmured, her voice trembling as she grappled with the enormity of Ethan's promise. Chapter 7. The Galaxy Gene. Among the 3 divine gene projects, the most coveted was the Galaxy Gene, rumored to confer an unstoppable future on anyone who possessed it. Du Changwei's heart burned with resentment. She hated Jie Xiaolun's betrayal, she hated being iron when she could be steel, and most of all, she hated that she lacked the power to command the galaxy. Now, as if in a waking dream, the object of her obsession floated before her. Ethan's voice was cool as ice. "Of course you're my princess," he said, presenting the galaxy gene in its crystalline shell. Du Changwei reached out, her fingers trembling, and Ethan allowed her to take it. With equal nonchalance, he turned to Qilin. "I've prepared a pluggy, N version of the galaxy gene for you as well." Qilin, herself a Lutheran Protoss, needed no external supergene. Her heritage already made her formidable. Still, Ethan had designed a perfect facsimile. Every sensor would read it as the genuine galaxy gene, and it would grant her access to its legendary abilities. In truth, it was nothing more than an elaborate shell. Ethan watched Du Changwei clutch the gene. He knew how badly this would shock the Dinor civilization. The idea that she, a human from the Heavens Tao world, had become the bearer of the galaxy gene. Rumors would spread, and when the Dinor people learned the truth, they would realize this power was unlike any they'd ever known, and that realization would change everything. But if Ethan had simply uploaded the galaxy power supergene into Du Changwei, it would send the bluntest of messages that the Heavenly Tao civilization regarded its crowning genetic achievement as utterly trivial, so cheap they could hand it to a mere princess. In all of recorded history, only one recipient had ever received such a gift, the Celestial Queen, Qilin herself. No archive, no legend, no rumor hinted at this technology being offered to anyone else. To imagine it bestowed freely on Du Changwei was unthinkable, even insulting to everything the heavenly Tao stood for. Du Changwei drifted in and out of consciousness as the super gene integrated with her body. Time blurred around her. She couldn't tell when the transfer began or when it ended. At last, clarity returned. She lifted her head, feeling the raw surge of power pulsing beneath her skin. "Aunt Lianfeng," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "you're wrong." Cradling the newly awakened galaxy power within her, Du Changwei made her way back to Blue Star. Every second counted now. She had to find Lianfeng and prove that this gift, once unimaginable, was now hers to wield. Chapter 256, You're Falling Behind. Old Relic. Ethan stared at Du Changwei, puzzled. "What do you mean?" A confident smile played on Du Changwei's lips. "Thanks to His Majesty, the God King of the Tiandao civilization, I've just been upgraded to galaxy power." Ethan's eyes widened. Angel Jixin and Zhao Xin, standing at his side, exchanged stunned glances. At last, Zhao Xin found his voice. "Galaxy power? Has it really gone into mass production?" "Impossible," Ethan muttered. He turned to Angel Xin. "Galaxy power shouldn't be compatible with her space-time Rose supergene. How can she possess both?" Without waiting for a reply, he activated his Deno Number 3 scanner and swept it over Du Changwei. Because she hadn't concealed her shadow data, the device immediately parsed her genetics. Detection target, Kamigawa host. Scan complete. Dual-core supergene engine detected. Core 1, Space-Time Rose. Core 2, Galaxy Power Supergene. Additional protocol, 3rd generation Tiandao Divine Body Matrix. Ethan's heart pounded. A dual-core supergene, fused with the Tiandao 3rd Gen Divine Body, it was beyond belief, and it meant Du Changwei had leapt centuries ahead of them all. Ethan's interface lit up with 2 active cores, the Space-Time Rose Supergene Engine and the Galaxy Power Supergene Engine. How could that be? Just days ago, Angel Jixin and Xin Zhao had toiled around the clock, carefully integrating the Galaxy Power Module into Xin Zhao's German Stargun Supergene Engine. Any misstep risked a cascade failure that could kill him instantly. Jixin had barely slept or eaten. Her every spare moment was spent nursing that engine's stability. Still, she thought, better that than watch the Galaxy Power drive overload and swallow them whole. Yet Ethan had been gone less than a single cycle. When he reappeared in the lab, the readouts on his console were staggering. Not only had he absorbed the Galaxy Power Core, he'd grafted on the Space-Time Rose system as well. Worse, and more inexplicable, he'd ascended to God class and unlocked the 3rd generation Tiandao Divine Body. Jixin ran the diagnostics herself. The data left no room for doubt. She looked over at Xin Zhao, whose own shoulders sagged in exhaustion. "We've been working for days just to keep one supergene engine alive," Jixin said, voice trembling. "How did Ethan manage 2, and in less than 20 hours? Xin Zhao shook his head. "I don't know. He must have tapped into something none of us even suspected existed. Some secret protocol in the Tiandao design, maybe." Jixin frowned at the display. Their angel civilization had staked its future on Sister Yan's progress. Every breakthrough they achieved was meant to secure a better tomorrow for their people. Instead, here stood Ethan, an unexpected prototype for the Galaxy Power Program, thanks to the Tiandao civilization's sudden ability to mass-produce that very gene engine. Ethan looked up from his console, eyes calm despite the chaos he'd just unleashed. "I found a dormant subroutine deep in the Tiandao code. It let me synchronize both cores. The moment we stabilize the integration, we can push far beyond any single engine limit." Jixin swallowed. If Ethan's words were true, they weren't just witnessing an upgrade. They were watching the birth of an entirely new class of warrior. And whatever came next, no one could pretend they saw it coming. Angel Jixin had once been as certain as Lianfeng that no Tiandao civilization could ever replicate galaxy power. After all, that energy was the very essence of the Milky Way, the highest form of supergenetic engineering in the known universe, unrivaled by any other. Yet now, like Lianfeng before her, she found herself staring in stunned silence at Du Changwei's forbidden data. The quiet between them was deafening. "What's the matter, my love?" Xin Zhao asked, concern softening his tone. Jixin could only remain silent, her mind racing. At length, Xin Zhao continued, "It's the Galaxy Power Supergene. the one in Rose's body. It's already unlocked privileges within our angel civilization. I'm not sure if she's also breached the Super Seminary's higher clearances yet, but... Jixin turned to him, her eyes wide. Xin Zhao himself hadn't attained full angelic authority. That level of clearance was reserved strictly for those who passed the 3 grand trials set by her master. Even she, second in command of the angels, had no shortcut past those gates. They existed to shape the future leaders of their kind, and the guardians enforced them with utmost rigor. If she can't conquer those trials, Jixin whispered, galaxy power might be effectively useless for us. Xin Zhao nodded gravely, recalling the brutal difficulty of each test. He ran a hand through his hair. So it really is that formidable. Jixin's reply was a solemn nod. The truth weighed on her heavier than any weapon. Galaxy power was far more potent and far more consequential than they had ever dared believe. Lianfeng let out a deep sigh. If the Tiandao civilization hadn't already deciphered the galaxy's power code, no one could have unlocked its permissions, and even she couldn't begin to imagine how they'd done it. And now she was hearing talk of a 3rd-generation divine body? His Majesty Ethan told me that the computational capacity of the Tiandao 3rd-generation divine body rivals that of Dano 3, Du Chengwei announced, her voice trembling with excitement. It uses dark energy drive technology to convert dark energy into kinetic, electrical, and thermal power. A single punch can deliver tens of millions of tons of force, and it can shrug off a 10 megatons nuclear blast as if it were nothing. She paused, eyes glittering. On top of that, it can soar on clouds and mist, traveling thousands of miles in a single breath. Du Chengwei fell silent, finally understanding why Raina had insisted she was a goddess among gods. This divine body was on an entirely different plane. Is this really the 3rd-generation model? She whispered. Angel Ji's expression went pale. As an angel herself, she knew better than anyone the true capabilities of their own 3rd-generation divine bodies, and this description surpassed even her wildest expectations. Though Ethan's new vessel outmatched the Tiandao version in raw computing power, it offered no other real advantages. Its so-called dark energy drive was underwhelming. Xiangbing Corporation was the first to master that technology, alongside wormhole manipulation, and for good reason. Every great god and super warrior in the universe before the Void Engine relied entirely on dark energy reserves and drive systems. Without the Ansu Silver technique or the Godslayer method, one's power came down to how much dark energy you could store and how well you could harness it. Du Chengwei stared at Angel Jixin's intense expression. Is it really that powerful? She asked. Angel Jixin met her gaze gravely. More powerful than you can imagine. He went on to explain that, under identical conditions, this celestial iteration of the 3rd-generation divine body, Ethan's own, would utterly destroy any angelic 3rd-generation model. There were only a handful of specimens in the known universe that could even come close. In that single divine body, you could see the full might of the Tiandao civilization laid bare. Ethan's dark energy propulsion field flared to life around his fist, its power so overwhelming that he could fell 3rd-tier gods with a single blow. Lianfeng stared at him, her mind reeling. All her convictions, her years of struggle, suddenly felt meaningless. Ethan's Galaxy Force supergene had shattered every one of her hopes. She recalled Du Chengwei's warning. They were years behind the Tiandao civilization, and any so-called obsolete Galaxy Force supergene was considered priceless to weaker realms. But the truth was far grimmer. Tiandao had already perfected mass production of Galaxy Force. Even someone with Du Chengwei's status could acquire it at will, let alone the dozens of gods under Tiandao's banner. They'd done it once, with the Nuoxing War God enhancements. They would inevitably do it again with Galaxy Force. When that happened, the 3 great god creation projects of the known universe would lose every shred of value. How could everything change so fast? Lianfeng's voice trembled. Across the training ground, Xin Zhao shrugged and barely spared her a glance. His thoughts were elsewhere. With Rose already wielding Galaxy Force, why would I carry such a monumental responsibility? He turned away, unconcerned by Lianfeng's despair. The universe had shifted, and only those ready to adapt would survive. Confusion hung in the air. Even the Archangel Jixin had no answer for Xin Zhao's question. With the galaxy's power now obsolete, How could Xin Zhao shoulder such an immense responsibility alone? The once unstoppable future has turned into a mockery, Jixin admitted, his wings drooping. Master, what should I do? Du Changwei seized the moment to caution Lianfeng against clinging to outdated ambitions. Those relics of power have long since lost their value, she said sharply. Set aside your petty hopes before the Tiandao Council grows impatient with us. Lianfeng wavered, then forced her voice steady. All right, but what about Qilin? Du Changwei's eyes lit up. Queen of Heaven, remember? She wields several gene engine modules, channels the galaxy's might, commands the Kryptonian war god's arsenal, even harnesses the sun's radiance. And now she's ascended to a fourth-generation divine body. If anyone can tip the scales for us, it's her. Chapter 257, Wholesale of Galaxy Power. This time, it was Delena's turn to lose her composure. Qilin's cheerful announcement, Rena, just like you, I'm going to have the sunlight super gene from now on, hit her like a thunderbolt. Qilin had meant no offense. She simply hoped to deepen her friendship with Rena. Instead, her words ignited Delena's fury. The sunlight super gene? How could that even be possible? Rena hissed. Flicking her wrist, Rena summoned her data scanner and ran a deep background check on Qilin. Streams of encrypted records and genetic logs burst onto the holo display. As the scan finished, her eyes locked onto one damning link. Her gaze snapped to Ethan, who had been standing quietly at her side. You can't expect me to believe Qilin just unlocked the sunlight gene on her own, Delena said, voice low and hard. No one bypasses the Tiandao Tower's gene lock, least of all on a solar lineage, unless someone deliberately intervened. Are you telling me you cracked it for her? Used my divine authority as cover? Ethan drew himself up, meeting her glare. But in Reina's mind, the answer was already clear. There was no other way Qilin could possess that power without direct assistance, and Ethan was the only person with both the knowledge and the motive to do it. So it was you all along, she accused. You funneled the sunlight super gene through me. Isn't that right? King Ethan looked up at Dylena's accusing stare, his expression calm and unruffled. Is my distrust so boundless, she challenged, that you would resort to, what, using the sun itself to probe my genetic engine? Ethan raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by the suggestion. He recalled teasing Morgana earlier, warning her not to turn herself into a living analyzer to map his genes, and now Dylena suspected he'd done the same to her. Absolutely not, he replied smoothly. A flush rose to Dylena's cheeks. No matter how fraught the rescue from Taudi had been, her genetic engine shut down under threat. She had never doubted Ethan's integrity. Yet the notion that he might exploit solar energy to test her DNA felt, if not impossible, then at least plausible. Then you truly underestimate me, and the power of the heavenly path, she declared, regaining her composure. You revere mere sunlight as if it were the ultimate prize, but I have already demonstrated the power to forge stars. In the art of starcraft, your Liyang civilization is a fledgling compared to our mastery. Ethan's gaze remained serene. As she spoke, a vivid memory seized Delena's mind. The shocking revelation that months ago, while Liyang scientists had only managed to create an avatar of the sun, she herself had become a living star, her radiance burning away the void of fear. In that moment, she was living proof of the heavenly path's true supremacy. Ethan stood beside the strange device, arms crossed, watching as Lena hesitated. If it could actually create stars, she said uncertainly, it shouldn't be called the light of the sun. It ought to be the power of the stars, or the power of the sun. Honestly, calling it sun god or star god wouldn't be wrong. Our Liyang is powerful too. Ethan reached out, guiding Xiaohan into his embrace. You just called yourself the blazing sun a moment ago, he teased. Lena's cheeks flushed. She scowled, clearly offended, then shot back on the spot. That's irrelevant. Once I conquer the blazing sun, it'll be ours, our own heaven. Ethan smiled indulgently. Go ahead and try. Just don't underestimate it. You can't survive the solar wind test alone. Lena huffed but said no more. After all, one of the team had already departed for the mine. Ethan didn't press her. He rather enjoyed her stubbornness. Part of it was the Kryptonian instinct for light that she shared. Something in him resonated with it, and part was Lena's refreshingly down-to-earth nature. Silly big sister, lovable fool. She took one last breath of sunlight, then sprinted off as if the world were chasing her. Ethan turned gently to Angel Leng, ready to continue their work. Ethan's calm voice cut through the hush of the pavilion. Concubine Leng, how would you like me to grant you the Galaxy Force Supergene? Angel Leng froze mid-step, her breath catching in her throat. What did you say? She glanced around, as if expecting someone to snatch the words away. Only moments ago she'd been weakly sipping one of Ethan's restorative smoothies, still on the mend from her last ordeal. And yet here he stood, his famously inexhaustible strength. And now, he claimed, a power beyond imagining. Ethan smiled, as if discussing the weather instead of rewriting the laws of life. Heaven's Tao has finally cracked the supergene of Galaxy Force. I want you by my side as my guardian angel, my princess. I refuse to let you miss this. Leng's heart thundered. All her life, angels had pursued Galaxy Force as the pinnacle of evolution, dedicating centuries to its discovery. Even though she'd always been content in her middle-tier station, she understood its true value. The idea that one man, one mere mortal, had unlocked it single-handedly was unthinkable. She sank to her knees, voice barely a whisper. How is that possible? Ethan reached out, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. It's done. Now stand with me and embrace your destiny. Her world tilted on its axis, destiny indeed, and one she never could have foreseen. Ethan watched Angel Leng's hesitation and pressed on. Du Changwei and my queen already command the power of the Milky Way, alongside the sun's radiance and even the might of the Kryptonian war god. You revere these three divinity projects as humanity's next evolutionary step. To Tiandao and me, though, they're just outdated supergenetic experiments. The core idea is sound, but with the right improvements it could be so much more. Angel Leng swallowed. You'll actually share that power with me? Absolutely, Ethan said calmly. She hesitated a moment longer. How long will it take? Right now, he replied with a small, confident smile. Despite her doubts, Angel Leng agreed to the upgrade. The moment the process finished, she plunged into her dark data logs and froze. Her eyes widened as she realized what had happened. Had she truly become an avatar of galactic power? Even more startling, her angelic gene had transformed into a foundational supergene, topped by the galactic power supergene and crowned with a third-generation celestial divine body. Angel Leng could only stare in awe, heart-pounding. Ethan's promise had been fulfilled. She was more than she had ever imagined. Ethan's new celestial form far outstripped the third-generation angelic vessel Angel Leng had always known. In the past, Angel Leng had served him out of duty, and becoming his guardian angel was a last-ditch sacrifice. Now, somehow, Ethan's quiet indifference had ensnared her heart just as effectively as any grand gesture. He treated her loyalty as if it were trivial, yet she and the other angels couldn't bear to see themselves as worthless. Angel Leng had never aspired to godhood. In her mind, there was only one true deity, Queen Kesha. Still, the temptation to rise above her own nature was impossible to ignore. Conflicted, she admitted to herself that her feelings for Ethan weren't the pure love Queen Kesha once described. They were born of necessity, an alliance forged by her responsibility to angelic civilization and the solemn oath she had sworn. There was no real choice in the matter. All the same, Angel Leng doubted she could ever win Ethan's genuine trust. Perhaps the only honorable path was to draw her sword in his defense and fall in battle by his side. If she died protecting him, she could fulfill her guardianship to its very last breath, and thus remain true to her vow. Ethan moved without warning, and Angel Leng felt a strange flutter in her chest, an emotion she hadn't experienced in years and couldn't quite name. "What are you planning?" she asked coolly, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt. He reached out and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Though he was seated, she had to look up at him. Ethan stood a good head taller than she did. "If you insist on courting death," he said softly, "I won't stand by and watch my concubine perish." Chapter 258, Li Yang is in trouble. Ethan knew Angel Leng better than anyone. He understood that tricking her into swearing a guardianship oath wouldn't make her follow him wholeheartedly. Angel Leng wasn't the sort of being to surrender her will so easily. For her, sentiment was fleeting. Her every thought was consumed by justice, sacrifice, and the need to prove herself. If the oath broke her spirit at all, it would only leave her more determined to fight to the death. She could never accept the binds of eternal devotion, and thawing her frost-bound heart would take far longer than Ethan had anticipated. He realized now that no ordinary ploy or threat could bend her to his side. Only a power like Holy Kesha's might stand a chance in a contest of divine wills, and Ethan was no Holy Kesha. His plan, built on subterfuge, had been fatally flawed. When Angel Lang heard Ethan invoke the guardianship oath, her first reaction wasn't gratitude or wonder, it was rage. How dare he use the divine essence of his own body to strip her freedom and bar her from leaving? There had to be a hidden back door in this celestial form, an insidious loophole that let Ethan control her. Her wings quivered with a barely contained storm of power as she glared at him. Ethan met her gaze, heart hammering. He had intended to bind her loyalty. Now all he'd done was provoke her wrath. He took a cautious step back, weighing his next move. Angel Lang's every sinew was coiled, ready to strike. In that tense silence, Ethan finally understood. If he wanted her as his guardian, he would have to earn it the hard way, through trust, not trickery. And time was a luxury he might not have. Angel Lang had managed just fine when she possessed only the angel gene. Back then, she could hold her own in a fight, and if she'd wanted to fall in battle, she could have. But now, infused with Galaxy Power's super genes and endowed with a divine body, even dying in combat lay completely beyond her reach. A second thought struck her almost at once. Am I truly that indispensable to Ethan? After all, she was merely Queen Kesha's high-level guardian angel. High-level sounded impressive, but in reality, her rank and influence were far beneath those of Angel Yan, and even Angel Jixin outranked her. As for looks, she considered herself attractive enough, but surely not one of a kind. And in the realm of charm, she fell short too. She lacked Angel Lingxi's gentle grace and could never match Angel Yan's reputation for teasing and beguiling male gods, a talent whispered about across the known universe. So why had Ethan poured untold resources into her, granting her Galaxy Power supergenes and the invulnerability of a divine body, if only to ensure she couldn't die in battle? The notion struck her as utterly absurd, yet the evidence was undeniable. Ethan watched Angel Yan's reaction closely as he explained, "The Tiandao divine physique and Tiandao gene I transferred to you are collectively known as the lightning gene. Think of them like the super genes used by the German star gun, only designed to boost your speed. These aren't Angel Yan's original lightning-based super genes, however." He paused to let that sink in, then continued, "Your innate lightning ability actually comes from the dark energy drive encoded in your original super gene. That gene grants only rudimentary dark energy propulsion, enough to temporarily harden your body for extra strength or to conjure a low-temperature fireball. Over time, through nuclear radiation mutations during Tianjia's Tiangong era, those primitive genes evolved into what we now call supergene engines. Today's supergenes embed tiny dark matter processors directly into the genetic structure, massively amplifying their potential." Angel frowned, then summoned the lightning gene module Ethan had given her. As her biotech scanner ran its diagnostics, a single new skill appeared on her readout, flash movement. According to the description, it converted dark energy drive into pure acceleration, exactly the enhancement she needed. Angel Home tapped at the holo display, her eyes widening as the figures scrolled past. "This lightning gene isn't like any standard enhancement. It can boost your acceleration from 2 Gs up to 100 Gs if your body can handle the strain. It doesn't give you the power to conjure or control electricity, only raw acceleration." Ethan folded his arms and studied the readout. "And that acceleration isn't just about how fast you can move. It amplifies everything, your reflexes, your thought processes, even your muscle response times. In a fight, your nerves fire at lightning pace, your mind leaps from one calculation to the next in an instant, and every limb obeys without hesitation. You simply can't be caught off guard by other supergene users." Angel exhaled slowly. "That explains why our spatial temporal wings, despite cruising at near-light speeds through the Insect Bridge network and docking at the Great Insect Bridge Station, are limited to supersonic velocities in actual combat. They're bound by the same reaction and neural delays that this lightning gene obliterates." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. This is pure acceleration taken to its extreme. No wonder the Tiandao civilization soared to such heights. They must have discovered and integrated these genes early on. According to frontier archives, there are dozens of potent beast warrior genes scattered throughout the outer rim, but the lightning gene traces back to the original supergene of a legendary beast warrior known simply as the lightning beast. That one prototype changed everything. Angel Leng and the others sat in silence as they pieced together the only theory that made sense. Edge space wasn't empty. It was filled with those beast avatars they'd heard rumors about. In the known universe, they'd only ever encountered them in battle alongside the triangles, and by sheer force of arms, they'd always won. But when it came to the unknown universe's edge space, Queen Keisha's archives were blank. There was no record of what lay beyond, no warning, no clue. Angel Leng wondered aloud why no one had ever ventured into that territory before. Was it fear of the unpredictable? The fog of war? Yet that same unknown region was now rolling in toward them, led by an overlord so powerful that the known universe stood no chance of resistance. All the while, back home, the powers of the known universe seemed more interested in turning inward, preparing for holy wars and internal clashes, than in facing this looming external threat. Angel Leng's thoughts raced. Every sign pointed to an irrational complacency, especially puzzling since the Tiandao Empire, which controlled the Milky Way, had shown no hostile intent. They simply held their ground, drawing minimal attention, and yet now the entire galaxy was in peril. Your Majesty! Just as Ethan was about to resume his playful banter with Angel Leng, a heaven-born god of war called out to him urgently. Ethan spared him a glance. What is it? The Liang civilization's status has shifted, the warrior reported. Curious, Ethan pulled up the Liang data stream. Sure enough, the South Heavenly Gate in the Tianmen system had fallen once more. Frankly, it was hardly surprising. Liang's frontier defenses were mediocre at best. In an earlier age, even the mythic Sun Wukong had stormed the gate, dispatched a squad of heavenly soldiers and generals single-handedly, and breezed inside. Liang simply lacked the firepower and shielding to rival the Angel civilization's formidable 19th line of defense. And contrary to the official logs, the gate hadn't been destroyed. A handful of Liang's god-class warships had slipped through the breach, sealed the entrance from within, and then signaled for reinforcements. Now a colossal fleet drifted across the starry void. Tau-Ti dreadnoughts, giant wolf battlecruisers, and swarms of the notorious Sky Scum raiders. Ethan leaned back, eyes narrowing. So they've decided to press their luck. The god of war bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. Ethan folded his arms. Very well. Prepare a response fleet. He turned to the holo display, already mapping countermeasures. The Liang challenge might be expected, but it would be answered. The Liang civilization had remained sealed off for far too long, and as a result, its ranks of super soldiers and gods had dwindled to dangerously low levels. The long-ago Devon Star and Promise Star wars had decimated the population, leaving only a handful of god-class battlecruisers to shelter what was left of their people. It was almost unbelievable that a so-called super-god civilization could shrink to such slender numbers. Along with the demographic collapse came a crippling decline in military strength. Now that Huaye's marauding army had reached Liang Star, it seemed all but certain that history would repeat itself, and that the world would face destruction just as the old prophecies predicted. Still, the defenders of Liang refused to back down. Pan Zhen, the master strategist whose schemes had shaped this civilization for 20 millennia, had no intention of submitting to Karl, the dreaded god of death. Chapter 259, The Fiery Sun Will Die. Pan Zhen's nature had always been rooted in strategy, prudence, and unerring clarity of purpose. As the guiding hand behind Liang civilization's rise, he had charted every campaign with surgical precision, balanced risks against outcomes, and never lost sight of the greater goal. Yet now, as he stood between two cosmic forces, the death god Karl and the goddess Delina, his resolve was tested as never before. He understood perfectly that an alliance with Karl offered Liang its only path to supremacy. The death god's power, combined with Liang's ingenuity, could elevate them to the foremost super-god civilization in the known universe. Even surrendering to Karl would be a calculated sacrifice. Pan Zhen himself would take on the mantle of traitor, a living bulwark against Delena's wrath, ensuring the goddess, and through her, all divine order remained intact. When the dust settled and Liang had mastered the secrets of void travel, Pan Zhen planned to shoulder every sin. He would publicize a sin edict, formally renouncing his authority and declaring himself the civilization's greatest criminal. By absorbing the universe's blame alone, he would spare Delena and the people who followed her from an ounce of reproach. The throne would fall vacant, the populace's fury directed solely at him, and the goddess's name would be untainted. In Pan Zhen's calculated mind, this unorthodox tactic was the only way to secure Liang's long-term survival. At the cost of his legacy, and potentially his life, he would preserve both the goddess's power and the future of his civilization. When history judged the man behind Liang's greatest gamble, it would find a leader who had borne the world's scorn so others might flourish under the fiery sun he was determined to let die on his own terms. Chapter 12. The Scorching Sun's Defiance. Queen Delena, the indomitable Scorching Sun's sovereign, stood unbowed before the death god Karl. Even after deftly consolidating power and claiming the throne as goddess empress of the sun civilization, she refused his terms. When Karl offered a dark alliance, Lena answered him with steel resolve. Her people sought only peace and prosperity, nothing more. Infuriated, the death god unleashed the full might of Huaye's fleet. Solar winds roared like cosmic cannons. Wave after wave of burning plasma tore through the Tauti armada, reducing warships to drifting wreckage. Yet Karl commanded the forces of the Styx Nebula, and his reserves of aerospace legions were limitless. To him, the slaughter was but a necessary sacrifice. Only Tauti King Shihao dared tremble at such waste of life. Meanwhile, aboard the star cruiser Aurelia, Ethan finally found Lena surveying the solar sea, her golden robes catching the light of distant flares. He relayed the grim tidings. Karl's forces were massing for another strike, poised to obliterate everything she had sworn to protect. Lena turned, eyes alight with purpose. "I have to go back." Ethan studied her. "Back where?" She drew a steady breath. "To the Liang civilization. It's my birthright. They look to me as their goddess and empress. I cannot abandon them now." He nodded, admiration and concern mingling on his face. "Then we leave at once. I'll stand by you, wherever you go." As the Aurelia powered up its engines, Lena raised her chin to the blazing horizon. The scorching sun might burn hotter than any star, but in her heart burned a brighter hope still, to lead her people into a new dawn. "I can't just stand by and do nothing." Lena's voice was steady, her eyes fierce. Ethan met her gaze. "The Yunxiao Heavenly Palace is gone," he said softly. "It was the flagship war celestial of the Liang civilization, and now there's nothing left but a handful of god-class cruisers. On the surface they still look formidable, but in truth, Liang has been hollowed out." He took a breath. "Thousands of years ago, Sun Wukong stormed their vaults, seized their treasures, and routed every celestial soldier and general they could muster. Since then, despite having more than enough resources to engineer super soldiers or create new god-class beings for the Xiangbing Corporation, Liang hasn't advanced at all. I still can't figure out why they've held back." Lena frowned. "So what do we do?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "You don't have to come with me. Pan Zhen is acting regent now. He has the authority, the forces, everything he needs to keep whatever's left of Liang's star intact." Lena's eyes narrowed. "You're planning to go alone?" He gave her a firm nod. In the old timeline, Pan Zhen would have died defending Liang's star, all for Lena, who had vanished before the palace fell. Now, with Lena's fate unknown, Ethan refused to let Pan Zhen throw his life away on a hopeless last stand. Pan Zhen needed to live, to find Lena, to save her if he could, and Ethan would make sure he had the chance. "Pan Zhen isn't going to die like that," Ethan said. "Not while there's still a chance to bring Lena home." Ethan's power erupted in a dazzling display. Although the Nantiamen system's wormhole conduits had been sealed off by the Liang civilization long ago, the Huaye army, backed by the death god Karl, had nonetheless forced their way past the blockade and driven deep into Liang's heartland. Now, both armies clashed in a ferocity never before seen. Ethan lifted his hand and unleashed a continuous barrage of micro-solar flares. Each concentrated burst was enough to liquefy an enhanced super soldier or shatter a third-generation divine armor. Were it not for the risk to his own forces, he would have unleashed an even larger flare and ended the battle then and there. At that moment, Huaye appeared on the battlefield. Without warning, he channeled violet-tinged, high-frequency void energy into a crackling beam aimed straight at Ethan. In an instant, Ethan recognized who truly commanded this assault. Ignoring the shouts of his allies, he activated his star projection. No hesitation, no second guess. It was as if he had anticipated this very confrontation, baiting Huaye into revealing himself. Now the stage was set for a showdown that neither side would soon forget. Pan Zhen's attack came without warning. Dozens of miniature, energy-packed suns streaked through the air toward Ethan's position and detonated in rapid succession. The ground shook beneath the blasts, and a wave of searing heat peeled flesh from bone. Ethan's eyes snapped wide. How many soldiers did he just annihilate? Lena gasped at his side. Before Pan Zhen could press the advantage, Ethan unleashed a counterstrike of high-frequency void energy. The searing shockwave struck Pan Zhen full force, driving him to one knee with a tortured groan. Star projection and void energy don't simply cancel each other out. They clash, magnifying the destruction in a violent feedback loop. Surrounding heavenly soldiers, and the traitorous scum among them, were caught in the crossfire. In an instant, they were incinerated, their bodies reduced to ash that drifted away on the wind. When the dust settled, Ethan still stood, but both of his once majestic wings were reduced to charred stumps, blackened and useless. It was the first time he'd suffered such grievous wounds at point-blank range. Only by triggering the hidden program fragment left behind by the black hole engine had he erected a desperate void barrier in time to save himself. Without that failsafe, he'd already be dead, perhaps awaiting resurrection at the hands of Death God Karl. Ethan had nearly killed Pan Zhen when Void Sunlight Nusa, one of Death Lord Karl's 4 Void Knights, intervened. With a swift motion, she unleashed her black, lantern-shaped void weapon, encasing Pan Zhen in a sphere of impenetrable darkness. Snow, standing beside Nusa, regarded Huaye coolly. With Delina gone, Pan Zhen has become far too valuable to Lord Karl to be destroyed. Nusa said nothing, simply folding her arms in silent authority. Huaye bristled. Karl almost wiped me out. I demand an explanation for this betrayal. Snow shrugged as if the question were beneath him. Lord Karl grants no favors. Swear your loyalty to him, and you'll never want for sustenance or safety. He took a step forward, arrogance coloring every word. Only by following Karl's will can your celestial palace endure its triumphant rise. My God is the guiding light of the cosmic pantheon. Delina's eyes glistened with desperation as she turned to Ethan. Ethan, please, help me. Ethan met her gaze, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Then tell me exactly what you need. If I strike now, eliminating them won't be difficult, but Death God Karl won't simply back down. He could even elevate Huaye into a 4th-generation god under his banner. That would mean Tiandao civilization faces yet another formidable adversary. Ethan paused, letting his words sink in. Before him stood Lena, a major god in her own right. Her insights into the tangled politics between civilizations ran deep. She knew Ethan's warning wasn't idle conjecture, but a very real threat. After all, the precarious balance of order and chaos that governed known space existed only because Ethan's heavenly Tao civilization had, until now, restrained its true power. Any aggressive move could shatter that balance and invite the wrath of one of the universe's most relentless foes. Chapter 260, The Heavenly Tao's Overwhelming Presence. Ethan stood on the observation platform of the Super Seminary Citadel, his gaze drifting over the vast expanse of star clusters that had become his domain. Since the Heavenly Tao civilization had made no aggressive moves, Death God Karl had likewise chosen to leave them be. In fact, Karl's attention was so fully absorbed by his own schemes that he scarcely noticed Ethan, at least not yet. Long ago, the Tao Ti and Giant Wolf civilizations, once nestled within the Milky Way, had been summoned back by Death God Karl and effectively handed over to Huaye's command. With both sides tacitly agreeing that if you don't strike first, I won't strike back, a fragile peace held sway. Karl, preoccupied with darker ambitions, had no reason to single Ethan out unless Ethan himself became the aggressor. And any hostility on Ethan's part would breed a hatred far more absolute than simple rivalry. But Ethan wasn't worried. Even if Death God Karl someday unleashed his full terror across the Super Seminary universe, Ethan knew he had nothing to fear. Whatever threats might loom on the horizon, he felt untouchable. For now, his greatest concerns were far more leisurely. The Super Seminary universe had become Ethan's comfortable home base, a place where he trained, researched, and entertained friends from countless realms. Beyond its borders lay the Marvel Universe and the Dragon Ball Universe, realms brimming with opportunity. There, Ethan gathered rare artifacts, forged powerful alliances, and embarked on adventures that enriched both his power and his reputation. So long as the heavenly Tao civilization remained content to watch from the sidelines and Death God Karl busied himself elsewhere, Ethan indulged in an almost holiday-like existence. Battles would come, as they always did, yet for the moment, the cosmos lay peacefully before him, ripe for exploration and conquest. And Ethan, ever the confident strategist, was more than ready to seize whatever wonders awaited. Ethan's expression remained calm. "There are still forces in those two universes that can threaten me," he said softly, watching Rena for any sign of doubt. What he really meant was clear. He wanted her complete loyalty, her whole heart. Rena's allegiance still lay with the Liang civilization, but Ethan knew, if Liang's star itself were destroyed, the civilization would collapse. After all, a people without their homeworld are much like Asgardians without Asgard. Rena was no fool. She understood the implication behind Ethan's words. Yet when she saw the agents of the Dark Melody Academy closing in on Pan-Gen, surely not to offer aid but to drag him away, her resolve hardened. She straightened her shoulders and addressed Ethan with renewed determination. "I am your princess," she declared. "Send our forces to save Liang." Her voice rang with authority. Unlike Queen Keelan, who, though crowned, never dared to exercise her royal power, Rena fully grasped the weight of her title. She would not hesitate when her people were at stake. Ethan inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Very well. I will dispatch 100 heavenly Tao war gods, 500 third-generation super soldiers, ranked from heavenly soldiers to generals, and Angel Leng, the galaxy power, lightning war god." With that promise, Rena knew their rescue mission had begun, and that Liang's fate would soon be decided. Angel Leng's eyes widened when she grasped the full scope of the plan. For a moment, she looked ready to protest, but as a guardian angel rather than a princess, she had no authority to argue. After all, you don't send one princess to guard another. Ethan caught her hesitation with a gentle smile. "She loves what he loves, Angel Leng." Angel Leng snorted softly. Without another word, she ushered Rena forward along with the reinforcements bound for Liang. Watching the formations materialize before her, she felt certain they were invincible. Even if the enemy deployed void wielders or void-forged equipment, these true PS would shatter them in an instant. 100 heavenly Tao war gods alone were enough to decide any battle, and these weren't even the pinnacle models. The No-Star War God Modified and Krypton War God Modified units were already among the supreme champions of the known universe, and that was before you counted Rena, who was still in her trance-enhanced state. Rena stared in awe at the glittering legions. "Is the old Liu family really that proud?" she murmured, dumbfounded. It astonished her that a single word from Ethan had summoned such a prodigious force, one more than sufficient to overwhelm the entire Liang civilization. Rena had always believed that recruiting even 100 or fewer heavenly soldiers and generals would be a tremendous coup. After all, these warriors were all third-generation super soldiers, and in the entire Angel Nebula, there were fewer than 30 of them. Even though the Tiandao civilization's overall numbers paled in comparison to some of the larger empires, its third-generation fighters were priceless, each one worthy of an entire civilization's commanding corps. The Tiandao heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals are both third-generation super soldiers, Rena explained, tapping the datapad in her hand. The soldiers are the mass-produced variety, but the generals carry specialized super genes. They are the crown jewels of Tiandao bioengineering. Angel Leng and Lena leaned forward, their eyes scanning the newly decrypted files. Until now, none of that data had been accessible. They were state secrets even within the wider Angel Nebula. Both women absorbed the details in near silence, realizing the significance of what Rena was revealing. Meanwhile, Snow and Nusa were finalizing arrangements to send Pan-Gen back to Dead Song Academy via interstellar courier. Their preparations were almost complete when the air shimmered, and a squadron of silver-armored, silver-winged soldiers swept through a newly opened wormhole. Their technology, Rena noted with a hint of awe, was even more advanced than the Void Demon Imperium's famed warp gates. Ethan stood at the ready, watching the newcomers descend. In that moment, it was clear. Tiandao's elite had arrived, and with them, the balance of power in the Angel Nebula was about to shift. They moved like wraiths, cutting down the sky's filth, giant wolves, man-eaters, every foul beast, just as easily as slicing through melons. "King Huaye!" someone shouted. Kunpeng met a heavenly soldier's blade with his own sword, sparks flying as steel clashed with silver. But the moment the stranger's sword, infused with Suyin, touched his guard, Kunpeng's blade splintered to shards. Ethan didn't hesitate. He leapt into the fray wielding a dark Suyin sword, an alloy of pure Suyin and dark iron, whose edge no ordinary weapon could match. Even the legendary flaming sword, or the fearsome Godslayer, would falter against its keen metal. Yet among these skyborn warriors, only Sumali bore the fabled silver blade. The rest carried ancient heavenly palace weapons, still formidable, still deadly, but no match for true Suyin. As swirling wormholes opened around him, Ethan darted back and forth, his dark Suyin blade flashing in the dim light. Time and again he cut through lesser foes, only to be checked by the heavenly generals. Their silver-tipped spears and halberds formed an unbreakable line. He ground his teeth. Damn it, Suyin blades. He knew it well. Only Suyin or Dark Suyin could stand against these celestial weapons. Everything else, no matter how enchanted, would shatter like glass. And tonight, amidst these ghost-like killers, Ethan had to keep fighting until he could claim a true Suyin weapon of his own. At this point, the silver blade had lost its edge. Against these third-generation super soldiers, it was like using a kitchen knife on bricks. No matter how many they sent, the blade could fell them in seconds. Yet if Suyin or her dark counterpart joined the fray, the fight would be far from easy. Sumali gaped as a host of golden-armored winged warriors advanced, and every one of them outclassed him. He forced the silver blade back to his side. Otherwise, a single stroke would have cut him down. Then, with a roar that split the sky, the heavenly war god descended. His divine aura tore through the enemy ranks, crushing them in an instant. Angel Leng and Lena didn't even have to lift a finger. The battle was over before it truly began. Ruoning, Sumali, Snow, and Nusa pressed in close around Huaye, now surrounded by heavenly soldiers and the war god himself. Nearby, Lena sprinted toward the shimmering void cage imprisoning Uncle Pan Zhen. "Uncle Pan Zhen!" she cried, wrenching at the bars, but the void-forged bonds held fast. Huaye's eyes burned with fury. What does this so-called heavenly civilization want? Is Ethan about to intervene? A towering heavenly soldier snarled, "How dare you speak of it like that?" Yet before Huaye could answer, a figure in resplendent golden armor drifted down from above. It was a heavenly god, and with a voice that thundered across the field, he declared, "You will not defame the name of His Majesty, the God King." Ethan focused all his strength into a single, terrifying strike. "Watch out. He's got the dark silver blade outfitted with the god-killing engine." Snow's warning came in an instant. "What?" Ruoning's eyes went wide. Embedding the god-killing engine in pure dark silver was considered virtually impossible. If it could be done at all, it required alloying the core with multiple rare metals, and even then, the weapon would be wildly unstable. Xingming's own trial had ended with a blade so temperamental it ate scrolls and snapped back at its wielder. She'd never imagined the Tiandao civilization would dare install the engine directly on dark silver. The result was a weapon that combined the deadliest physical strike imaginable with raw energy annihilation. "Huaye, launch the high-frequency void wave, now!" Ruoning barked, her voice crackling with urgency as she braced for the blast.